Hey there, tonight we're exploring the art of bread making in ancient Greece, where the truth is, every loaf was a journey through time, crafted with hands that shaped history one knead at a time. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. The rooster has barely finished its early morning serenade, and already you're knee-deep in the flowery world of ancient Greece. Forget your modern-day espresso. Here, bread is the king of morning rituals, and you're about to embark on a culinary odyssey where grains rule the roost. In this world, wheat and barley aren't just humble ingredients. They're the backbone of the Greek diet, the ancient equivalent of Bitcoin, if you will. You see, grains are serious business here. Wheat is like the gold standard of grains, while barley is its scrappy, reliable cousin. In Athens, a medimnos of wheat, a hefty 51, 84 liters of the stuff, could set you back about 6 drachmas. That's enough to make even a Spartan wince. And barley, well, it's the everyman's grain, costing roughly half that of wheat. But don't let the price fool you. Barley isn't just filler. It's versatile, used in everything from bread to beer, a staple for the masses, and the backbone of the Greek economy. From farm to table, the journey of these grains is no less epic than an Iliad in itself. Farmers work tirelessly, ploughing fields with wooden, arc-drawn ploughs that make modern machinery look like sorcery. Harvesting is a community affair, a rustic symphony of scythes and sweat. Once reaped, the grains make their way to the agora, the bustling marketplace where haggling is an art form. Picture vendors hawking their goods with the gusto of a modern-day stockbroker, each transaction a small drama of its own. But here's where it gets interesting. Bread isn't just a matter of personal taste, it's a matter of state interest. Enter the bread taxation system, a bureaucratic marvel that would make even the most seasoned tax accountant raise an eyebrow. The polis, ever the vigilant bread watcher, imposes taxes on bread to ensure everyone has access to it. This isn't some ancient version of a bake sale. It's a strategic move to keep the peace. Bread riots, after all, are a surefire way to topple governments faster than you can say democracy. Now, as you step into the typical Greek kitchen, you're greeted by a setup that's both minimalist and ingenious. Forget your modern gadgets. Here, the tools of the trade are as down-to-earth as they come. A clay oven, or klebanos, is at the heart of this operation, its dome-shaped structure the precursor to the modern pizza oven. And that stone mill. It's a beast that requires muscle, grinding grain into flour with the slow, relentless rhythm of the tides. In this space, bread making is both art and science, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of necessity. It's a daily dance of dough and fire, where the simplest ingredients are transformed into sustenance. As you knead the dough, you can almost feel the weight of history pressing down on your shoulders. Each loaf is a link in a chain stretching back through time, a connection to ancestors who lived, loved, and labored over this same task. The bread itself is a revelation. It's not the fluffy, preservative-laden stuff you might be used to. No, this is dense, hardy fare, a symphony of flavors that speaks of the earth and toil, of hands that have shaped it for millennia. And as you break bread, you're not just feeding your body, you're partaking in a tradition as old as civilization itself. So, next time you bite into a slice of bread, spare a thought for those ancient Greeks, whose daily grind was literally that. In a world where grains were currency, and bread was both sustenance and security, every loaf was a testament to human endurance and ingenuity. Welcome to a day in the life of ancient Greece, where bread is more than just food, it's a legacy. As the aroma of baking bread wafts through the air, you're jolted back to the hustle of mid-morning in ancient Greece. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty, literally. Grinding grain with a rotary quern is less about finesse and more about sheer grit. Think of it as ancient CrossFit, a workout for the ages with a side of flour. Picture this. A rotary quern is essentially 2 hefty stones stacked like a primitive sandwich, with grain as the filling. The top stone is rotated by hand. No electricity here, folks, and its weight crushes the grain into flour. It's the kind of labor that builds biceps as well as bread, with each turn demanding more elbow grease than a modern spin class. In fact, it's estimated that grinding enough flour for a family could take several hours a day. That's right, forget your morning jog. Your daily cardio comes with a side of carpal tunnel. And while we're on the subject of grinding grain, let's bust a myth or two. Romanticized visions of pastoral life often gloss over the physical toll of such relentless labor. Sure, it might sound idyllic, but the reality is back-breaking work that leaves your muscles aching and your hands calloused. It's survival, plain and simple, a far cry from the serene, bucolic scenes painted by poets and dreamers. Now, let's talk about the bread itself. The Greeks had their carbs sorted, with a spectrum of breads that speaks volumes about their culinary creativity and social hierarchy. At the base of the bread pyramid is the humble barley loaf. This wasn't just bread. It was the ancient Greek equivalent of a PB and J, reliable, filling, and the go-to option for those on a budget. Barley bread was dense, chewy, and packed with nutrition, perfect for the hoi polloi and soldiers alike, who needed sustenance more than fluff. But if you were rolling in drachmas, you might opt for the luxurious wheaten bread. This was the caviar of carbs, reserved for those who could afford the finer things in life. Made from wheat flour, it was lighter, more refined, a delicacy that was often sweetened with honey or enriched with olive oil, flaunting wealth with every bite. Bread in ancient Greece was as much about status as sustenance. Your choice of loaf spoke volumes about your place in the social pecking order. And let's not forget the cultural significance of bread in Greek society. Bread was more than just food. It was a staple at religious ceremonies, a symbol of hospitality, and an offering to the gods. It was believed that Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, watched over the grain from seed to loaf. So when you broke bread, you weren't just feeding yourself. You were part of a divine cycle, a nod to the gods who blessed the harvest. But don't think for a second that Greek bread-making happened in a vacuum. Oh no, the culinary cross-pollination with neighboring cultures added its own spice to the mix. Take, for instance, the influence of the Egyptians, who were masters of fermentation long before sourdough starters became a hipster obsession. The Greeks learned a thing or two about leavening from their southern neighbors, making their bread rise to new heights, literally. The Persians also played their part, introducing flatbreads that were perfect for scooping up stews and dips. This exchange of ideas was the ancient version of a cooking show crossover episode, a delightful blending of styles and flavors that enriched the Greek diet and left a lasting legacy on their baking practices. So, as you knead the dough and feel the weight of history in your hands, remember that each loaf of bread tells a story, a tale of trade, toil, and tradition. It's a reminder that the simplest acts of daily life are often the most profound, connecting us across time and space. And as you look forward to the next part of our journey, know that the world of ancient Greek bread-making is as rich and varied as the grains themselves. Stay tuned for more tales of doughy delight, where the past rises like a perfectly baked loaf. As the doughy odyssey continues, imagine the sun high overhead, casting shadows that dance across the ancient Greek landscape like playful nymphs. It's the perfect backdrop to dive into the myths that flavored Greek bread-making with a sprinkle of divine drama. Now, let's talk about Demeter, the goddess who could make crops grow with a mere flick of her divine wrist, or so the story goes. In reality, while Demeter might have got all the credit in the mythological PR department, the real heroes were the farmers, whose sweat and toil turned soil into sustenance. Now, if you ever wondered why Demeter was so revered, it's simple. She was the original grain influencer. Imagine a society where every loaf of bread was a testament to her benevolent oversight. Forget the myth that she personally blessed every ear of grain. Her power was more about providing hope than actual harvest. People needed a reason to believe that their back-breaking labor would yield a bounty, and Demeter was the symbolic guarantee. In a world where a failed crop could mean the difference between feast and famine, divine reassurance was worth its weight in wheat. But let's not kid ourselves. The real magic happened in the fields and hearths, where human hands, calloused and persistent, shaped grains into life's most essential food. And speaking of hands, bread-making in ancient Greece wasn't a solitary affair. It was the social media of its day, bringing people together faster than you can say, potluck. Imagine entire communities gathering to grind, knead, and bake, each loaf a collaborative effort that transformed mundane ingredients into something extraordinary. Bread-making was the original team-building exercise, with each person playing their part in the culinary symphony. And here's where the myths start to crumble like old crusts. While it's tempting to picture idyllic scenes of harmonious bread-making, the truth was a tad messier, literally. Baking was a communal affair, yes, but it also involved a fair amount of jostling for resources and space. In a world where every household had its own version of the klebanos, it was a constant battle for the best firewood, the finest grain, and the most favorable hearth spot. It was less of a peaceful dance and more of a strategic game of culinary chess. Now, let's talk economics. Bread wasn't just a staple, it was a social currency. In ancient Greek society, hospitality was a sacred duty, and bread was its universal language. When a guest arrived, no matter how unexpected, the first thing you offered was bread. It was the edible equivalent of a handshake, a gesture of goodwill that said, "You're welcome here." This wasn't just about politeness, it was about survival. In a world where alliances could mean life or death, breaking bread was the ultimate peace offering. And don't forget the political angle. Bread was such a vital part of the Greek diet that it often found its way into the political sphere. Leaders knew that a well-fed populace was a content one, and bread control was a key strategy in maintaining order. The famous bread dole, or sedos, was a state-run program to distribute grain to citizens, ensuring that no one went hungry, and more importantly, that no one got rowdy. It was the ancient version of social security, a safety net made of flour and water. So next time you hear tales of Demeter and her miraculous wheat fields, remember the reality behind the myth. It was the grit and grind of ordinary people that made miracles happen. As you break bread with friends, consider the stories that have been baked into every loaf, the echoes of ancient hands that shaped our world one grain at a time. And stay tuned, because the tale of ancient Greek bread-making isn't over yet. There's more history to unravel, more myths to debunk, and more loaves to lift from the ovens of time. Speaking of tales that have been baked into every loaf, let's dive into how bread became more than just food in ancient Greece. It became a political currency. Remember, we're dealing with a time when bread was as much a political buzzword as jobs or healthcare are today. Politicians knew that keeping their citizens full was akin to keeping them happy, or at least less likely to riot. Let's talk about Athens, the cradle of democracy, but also the stage for some of the earliest bread-based political maneuvers. You see, the Athenian leaders were no strangers to the concept of bread and circuses, or panem et circenses, if you want to flex your Latin, though the Romans would later perfect this strategy. Bread distribution was a tool for social control, an edible insurance policy against civil unrest. Imagine this. You're an Athenian citizen, your stomach grumbling louder than a Spartan's war cry. You head to the Agora, where the state is doling out free grain as part of the sedos, a grain distribution program that was both a lifeline and a leash. It's the 5th century BCE, and Athens is thriving, thanks in no small part to its control over the grain-rich regions of the Black Sea. The city imports an estimated 400,000 medimnoi of wheat annually, a staggering amount meant to ensure that no Athenian goes hungry, or perhaps more crucially, that no Athenian gets angry enough to stage a coup. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just a benevolent act of public welfare. The bread dole was a calculated move to maintain the delicate balance of power. You see, those in power understood that an empty stomach is a revolutionary one. By controlling the bread supply, they could effectively sway public opinion and maintain political stability. It's a strategy that echoes throughout history, from the Roman Empire's grain doles to the modern-day food stamps in the United States. And while we're on the subject of control, let's not forget the bakeries. In ancient Greece, these weren't just places to grab a quick loaf. They were hotbeds of political intrigue. Bakers were often at the mercy of the state, their prices and supplies regulated to prevent profiteering and ensure the populace remained fed and docile. The state's grip on bread production was tighter than a miser's purse strings, and woe betide any baker caught skimping on quality or quantity. This control wasn't just about feeding the people, it was about feeding the economy. Bread was a keystone of trade, with cities like Athens importing vast quantities of grain to sustain their populations. The grain trade was big business, with its own share of risks and rewards. Pirates lurking in the Aegean, storms brewing over the Black Sea. Every shipment was a gamble, with the prosperity of the polis hanging in the balance. And here's where the myth-busting comes into play. While it's tempting to picture a benevolent state feeding its grateful citizens, the reality was often more cutthroat. Grain shortages could lead to panic and unrest, forcing leaders to make tough calls. Do you increase imports and risk economic strain, or tighten rations and risk public revolt? It was a delicate dance, a high-stakes game of resource management that could make or break a politician's career. But let's not pretend that these bread-related policies were purely altruistic. There was a hefty dose of self-interest involved. Leaders knew that their power was tied to the prosperity of their city, and prosperity was measured in bread. It's the same reason why modern politicians focus on economic growth and job creation. Bread, in its many forms, remains a universal symbol of stability and security. Take, for instance, the role of bread in times of war. During conflicts, ensuring a steady bread supply was as crucial as maintaining a strong military. A well-fed army was a formidable one, and leaders went to great lengths to keep their troops supplied with bread and other staples. This was Logistics 101, ancient Greek style, a precursor to the supply chain strategies of modern warfare. So, what can we learn from the politics of bread in ancient Greece? For starters, that food has always been a powerful tool in the political arsenal. Whether it's a grain dole in ancient Athens or a food bank in a modern metropolis, the distribution of food remains a vital aspect of governance. It's a reminder that while the players and settings may change, the game of politics and its reliance on bread is as old as civilization itself. As we wrap up this chapter, let's acknowledge the dual nature of bread in ancient Greek society, with sustenance and strategy, nourishment and negotiation. Each loaf was a testament to human ingenuity, a symbol of the complex interplay between food and power. And as we look forward to exploring more of this doughy saga, remember that the story of bread is far from over. There are more crumbs to follow and more layers to uncover as we continue our exploration of the ancient world's most essential food. Stay tuned for more tales from the ovens of history, where bread is both a staple and a story waiting to be told. So, as the sun dips below the horizon, casting its golden glow over ancient Greece, let's chew over the legacy of bread-making that these ancient bakers left us. And trust me, it's a legacy that's as rich as a Corinthian merchant during a grain boom. First off, let's talk tech, ancient Greek style. The Greeks were trailblazers, not just in philosophy and drama, but in the art of baking too. They perfected the klebanos, that dome-shaped clay contraption that was the precursor to the modern pizza oven. It's a testament to their ingenuity that we've adopted and adapted these techniques even today. I mean, who doesn't love a good wood-fired pizza? And let's not forget the rotary quern, a simple yet effective invention that turned grain into flour with the help of some good old-fashioned elbow grease. You could say it was the Fitbit of its day, minus the step count. But it wasn't just the gadgets that have persisted. The Greeks were early adopters of fermentation, a technique they picked up from the Egyptians. This process not only made their bread rise to fluffy new heights, but also laid the groundwork for the sourdough renaissance we're witnessing in artisanal bakeries today. So, when you're savoring that tangy bite of a sourdough boule, give a nod to those ancient Egyptians and Greeks for their pioneering spirit. Now, on the cultural side of things, the Greeks were big on hospitality. Philoxenia, they called it. Bread was more than just sustenance. It was an emblem of this cultural ethos. This tradition of breaking bread to welcome a guest has stood the test of time, morphing into everything from the dinner rolls you pass around at Thanksgiving to the naan you share at an Indian restaurant. It's a small gesture with a big heart, and it's as ancient as the Acropolis. And while we're on the topic of things that have stood the test of time, let's talk about bread as a social equalizer. The Greeks knew that bread could bridge the gap between the wealthy and the not-so-wealthy. Fast forward a couple of millennia, and bread continues to play this role. Whether it's a baguette in Paris or a tortilla in Mexico, bread is the food that unites us all. It's the original equal opportunity food group. Now, let's sprinkle in a bit of humor, shall we? Imagine if you could pluck a Greek baker from 500 BCE and drop them into a modern-day artisanal bakery. Picture their reaction to the hipster barista explaining a sourdough starter's unique microbiome while clutching a $7 cold brew. They'd probably squint at the gluten-free aisle like it was a temple to Apollo. And the price of a loaf. enough to make even the most stoic philosopher clutch his toga in shock. "You're charging how much for air bubbles in bread?" they'd ask, incredulous. To wrap up this doughy saga, let's remember that bread is more than just food. It's a narrative, a symbol, a legacy. The Greeks, with their bread taxes and grain doles, knew that controlling bread was akin to controlling the heart of their society. Fast forward to today, and while our methods have changed, the core idea remains: food is power. In the end, the enduring love for bread is perhaps best encapsulated by a line from Aristophanes, who once wrote, "Hunger knows no friend but its feeder." It's a reminder that bread is not just about filling stomachs, but about nurturing souls and communities. So next time you break bread, whether in a bustling city cafe or at a family dinner table, think of those ancient Greeks who shaped a cornerstone of our culinary world. It's a legacy that rises with every loaf and proves that, in the grand tapestry of history, bread is more than just a supporting character. It's the star of the show. Florence in the 15th century was an explosion of color, creativity, and cash, a place where art wasn't just an indulgence, it was an investment with returns that'd make Wall Street swoon. The streets bustled with the kind of energy you'd expect from a city that was about to redefine Western civilization. But while we're all busy romanticizing the Renaissance, let's not forget, this was a time when artists needed patrons more desperately than influencers need followers. And who better to play that role than the Medici family, the veritable Kardashians of the Renaissance? In Florence, the Medici weren't just a family. They were the economic engine that powered the entire cultural juggernaut. Their banking dynasty wasn't some quaint operation. By the mid-1400, the Medici Bank was the largest in Europe, with branches stretching from London to Constantinople. Cosimo de' Medici, the family patriarch, was as much a master of public relations as he was of finance. With a net worth that would make Jeff Bezos blush, Cosimo had the pocket change to commission works from the likes of Donatello and Fra Angelico. But these weren't mere vanity projects. Each sculpture, painting, and architectural wonder was a calculated investment in the Medici brand. Think of it as 15th century influencer marketing, but with a bit more marble. Let's not underestimate the power of the florin, either. This little gold coin was the Bitcoin of the Renaissance, widely accepted and trusted throughout Europe. When the Medici Bank started minting its own currency, it was like printing money, literally. With every florin stamped with the Medici coat of arms, the family wasn't just controlling the cash flow. They were embedding themselves into the very fabric of Florentine society. If you wanted to get anything done, whether it was commissioning a fresco or buying a loaf of bread, you needed florins, and by extension, you needed the Medici. But what did it really cost to get Michelangelo to chisel out one of his masterpieces? Well, Michelangelo's commission for the David in 1501 was 400 florins. Adjusting for inflation, that's roughly $70,000 today, a steal considering it's now priceless. This wasn't just a paycheck for Michelangelo, it was validation. A Medici commission was the 15th century equivalent of going viral overnight. Except instead of trending on Twitter, your name got etched into the annals of art history. Of course, Florence's cultural boom wasn't solely a result of domestic affairs. The city was a hub of trade routes that snaked their way across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Merchants traveled these routes, carrying not just silk and spices, but ideas and innovations. These trade routes were the original social media, spreading the Renaissance's influence faster than you could say New World Order. Thanks to these routes, Florence imported the best pigments, the most stylish fashions, and the latest in scientific thought. It was a melting pot of cultures and ideas, a thriving metropolis where the world came together and occasionally clashed. And let's not forget, while artists were chiseling away at marble, the political scene was just as volatile. Florence was technically a republic, but let's be real, it was more of an oligarchy in fancy clothing. The Medici's influence was so pervasive that they managed to control the city without holding an official title. It was a masterclass in soft power, the kind that would make even Machiavelli, who incidentally was a Florentine himself, nod in approval. While the Renaissance is often romanticized as a time of unbridled creativity, it was also a period when the harsh realities of economic necessity met the lofty ideals of artistic genius. Artists didn't just create for art's sake. They created to survive, to thrive, and if they played their cards right, to secure a legacy that would outlast the Medici Bank itself. And so, Florence became a city where the boundaries between commerce and creativity blurred, each fueling the other in a dance that would define an era. Welcome to the Renaissance, folks, not just a chapter in a history book, but a full-blown cultural revolution. The Medici family didn't just stumble upon their status as Florence's cultural kingmakers. They meticulously crafted it, one calculated brushstroke at a time. Think of them as the Renaissance's ultimate strategists, maneuvering through the labyrinth of politics and society with the finesse of a chess grandmaster eyeing checkmate. In Florence, art wasn't just a reflection of beauty. It was a currency of influence, and the Medici were minting it faster than their gold florins. Let's start by flipping through the pages of the Medici playbook. Enter Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, a man whose nickname screams, "I'm a big deal." And trust me, he was. Lorenzo transformed his family's art patronage into a masterclass in political strategy. By the late 15th century, he turned Florence into a beacon of Renaissance culture, attracting every artist who was anyone. But Lorenzo wasn't just throwing florins around like confetti at a wedding. Oh no, each commission was a strategic move, a way to reinforce Medici power without ever uttering a single word of political ambition. Take Leonardo da Vinci, for instance. Known for his Mona Lisa smile and enigmatic genius, Leonardo was the Renaissance's rock star. Yet, behind those dreamy depictions and scientific sketches, he had to juggle more than just his creative whims. Working in Florence meant navigating the Medici's labyrinthine power dynamics. Leonardo might have been a polymath, but he quickly learned that in Florence, the price of genius included a side of political savvy. And then there's Sandro Botticelli, whose Birth of Venus practically screams Renaissance glamour. But here's the kicker. Botticelli's works also mirrored the Medici's political agendas. His paintings were more than just pretty faces and divine figures. They were coded messages, visual sermons that subtly reinforced the Medici's ideals and their grip on power. Botticelli's patrons weren't just buying art. They were commissioning propaganda wrapped in a Renaissance bow. The Medici's art investments served as a form of soft power, something that would make even modern political analysts nod in admiration. By aligning themselves with artists, the Medici were essentially branding themselves as the cultural custodians of Florence. It was like they were saying, we're not just about banking, we're about creating a legacy that transcends the vaults. And this wasn't mere philanthropy. It was a shrewd calculation that ensured their influence was as enduring as the frescoes they commissioned. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that being a Medici-backed artist was all wine and roses. While Leonardo and Botticelli were painting masterpieces, they were also threading a delicate needle between creativity and conformity. Imagine being Leonardo, a man who wanted to dissect cadavers for science, while also trying to keep the Medici happy. A balancing act that would make even the most seasoned tightrope walker break a sweat. So how exactly did these artists manage to thrive under such constraints? Simple. They mastered the art of subtlety. Leonardo's sketches, while groundbreaking, often contained hidden layers of meaning, a nod to the complex relationship between artist and patron. Botticelli's works, too, were laden with symbolic undertones, serving as a visual dialogue with his Medici benefactors. Yet, for all their cunning, the Medici's strategy wasn't foolproof. Like any game of chess, one wrong move could lead to a rapid downfall. Political alliances were as fragile as the parchment Leonardo sketched on. Rival families and shifting allegiances meant that the Medici had to constantly adapt their tactics. They were playing a high-stakes game where art was both their shield and their sword. The Medici's influence extended beyond the canvas, shaping everything from architecture to education. Lorenzo the Magnificent, for example, didn't just commission art. He fostered an environment where intellectual discourse thrived. The Platonic Academy, a hub for philosophical exchange, was one of his brainchildren. Here, thinkers and scholars gathered, their debates echoing through the Medici palaces like the Renaissance's version of a TED talk. Lorenzo knew that cultivating a culture of intellectualism would not only elevate Florence, but also cement the Medici legacy. Yet, for all their grandeur, the Medici were not immune to the trials and tribulations of power. Their very success made them targets, a reality that could be as brutal as a Renaissance executioner on a bad day. The Pazzi conspiracy of 1478, an audacious attempt to overthrow the Medici, was a stark reminder that political power was as volatile as the Tuscan weather. Lorenzo himself narrowly escaped an assassination attempt during Mass, a dramatic episode that underscored just how dangerous the Medici Game of Thrones could be. Despite these challenges, the Medici's influence was undeniable. They weren't just patrons of the arts, they were architects of a cultural revolution. By investing in artists and intellectuals, they transformed Florence into a powerhouse of creativity and innovation. Their legacy is etched into the very fabric of the city, a testament to their vision and audacity. The Medici's story is a reminder that history is rarely as simple as it seems. Behind the romanticized facade of the Renaissance lies a complex web of power, politics, and patronage. The Medici understood this better than anyone, wielding art as both a tool of influence and a symbol of their enduring legacy. Their story is one of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of greatness, a story that continues to captivate and inspire, even centuries later. Speaking of Florence's golden age, let's shift our gaze from the Medici's lofty towers to the cobblestone streets where the real drama unfolded. Renaissance Florence was a place where social dynamics played out like a Shakespearean drama, with class lines as unyielding as the stone walls of the city itself. The highborn strutted about in their finery, while the rest did the Renaissance equivalent of hustling on Fiverr. Welcome to the reality check. For every Botticelli basking in Medici glory, there were countless others who barely scraped by, their stories lost to history's cutting room floor. Let's start with the guilds, the backbone of Florence's social structure. Think of them as the original LinkedIn, but with fewer endorsements and more actual power. These guilds weren't just trade associations. They were the gatekeepers of economic opportunity, controlling everything from wool production to banking. Want to make it as a tailor? Better join the Art della Lana or face a career of solo stitching. These guilds were more exclusive than a nightclub with a velvet rope. Membership was your ticket to the middle class, if you could afford the hefty fees and connections. But while the guild members enjoyed a degree of stability, the real power was reserved for the popolo grosso, or the big shots. These were the wealthy merchants and bankers, the folks who made the Medici look like humble civil servants. They called the shots in Florence, their influence stretching from the Palazzo Vecchio to the halls of the Uffizi. Sure, Florence was technically a republic, but let's not kid ourselves. Democracy had as much presence as a fig leaf on David. Then there were the popolo menudo, the little people. Artisans, laborers, and peasants who kept the city running, but rarely saw the fruits of their labor. The romanticized frescoes of the time might depict idyllic pastoral scenes, but the reality was closer to a medieval version of Survivor. These folks lived in cramped quarters, eking out a living in a world that often seemed stacked against them. The Renaissance might have been a golden age, but for many it was more like fool's gold. Education was another arena where the Renaissance wasn't as universally accessible as its reputation suggests. Sure, we love the idea of the universal man, a polymath dabbling in everything from astronomy to zoology, but let's be real. This was a luxury only the elite could afford. Education was expensive, and unless you had a Medici footing the bill or were lucky enough to snag a scholarship to the University of Florence, you were more likely to be taught a trade than the intricacies of Latin rhetoric. Women, too, found themselves on the periphery of this so-called enlightenment. While a few exceptional women like Lucrezia Tornabuoni, Lorenzo's mother, wielded influence, most were confined to roles prescribed by a society that valued their dowries more than their intellect. A woman's education, if she received one at all, was typically limited to domestic skills. Forget painting or philosophy. Needlework and managing a household were the curricula of the day. And let's not ignore the church, the omnipresent institution that dictated morality with the kind of authority that would make even the most overbearing HOA blush. The church was both a spiritual guide and a political powerhouse, with priests and bishops often acting as intermediaries between the divine and the decidedly earthly ambitions of Florence's elite. If you think navigating office politics is tricky, try doing it in a cassock with the threat of excommunication hanging over your head. But for all its rigid hierarchies and social stratification, Florence was also a place of opportunity, if you knew how to play the game. The savvy could climb the social ladder, leveraging connections and capital in a city that rewarded cunning as much as it did creativity. It was a world where fortunes could be made and lost in the blink of an eye, where today's artisan could be tomorrow's entrepreneur, and where the next Michelangelo might be hiding among the apprentices, just waiting for their big break. In this vibrant tapestry of Renaissance life, the myths and realities of the era were as intertwined as the threads of a Florentine tapestry. We revel in the romance of the Renaissance, its art and innovation, yet beneath the surface lies a world where power and privilege were jealously guarded, and survival often required as much artifice as art. So, as we continue to unravel the layers of this fascinating period, let's remember that the Renaissance wasn't just about the masterpieces hanging in galleries. It was about the people, every class, every guild, and every unsung hero who contributed to this extraordinary chapter in history. Stay tuned, because the story of Florence's social dynamics is just getting started. The Renaissance wasn't just about the glittering surface of art and architecture. It was a seismic shift in thought, with humanism at its very heart. Picture the intellectual equivalent of a rock concert, where everyone from Plato to Aristotle was jamming on stage, and you're starting to get the idea. Humanism was a revival of classical ideas, but don't let the toga-clad statues fool you. This was less about dressing like Julius Caesar, and more about questioning established norms, including the church's monopoly on truth, with the audacity of a teenager who just discovered their parents aren't always right. Let's dive into the heady world of humanism, where thinkers like Petrarch and Boccaccio were the Renaissance influencers, challenging medieval scholasticism with the kind of rhetorical flair that would give Socrates a run for his drachmas. Petrarch, often hailed as the father of humanism, wasn't content with the dusty tomes of the Middle Ages. Oh no, he was all about rediscovering the lost works of antiquity, unearthing forgotten texts like they were buried treasures. He was the Indiana Jones of the 14th century, minus the fedora. Humanism emphasized the value of humans' individual potential and critical thinking. It was the intellectual wake-up call Europe desperately needed, a reminder that the world wasn't just a waiting room for the afterlife. Scholars began to focus on subjects like literature, history, and moral philosophy, essentially the humanities, rather than just theology. This shift in thinking was akin to swapping out a black and white television for a Technicolor extravaganza. Suddenly, the world was bursting with new perspectives and possibilities. Now, while the church wasn't exactly thrilled about this Renaissance remix, they couldn't ignore it either. After all, the Vatican Library didn't stock itself. But let's not pretend they handed out gold stars to every scholar with a fresh idea. The church was like that overzealous hall monitor who loved enforcing rules, even if they occasionally had to rewrite them. Humanists like Erasmus managed to walk this tightrope with finesse, advocating for reform within the church while avoiding a one-way ticket to Heretic City. Humanism wasn't just an intellectual affair. It permeated all aspects of culture. Art became more than just religious iconography. It was a celebration of the human experience. Think of Michelangelo's David. This wasn't just biblical fan art. It was a towering testament to human beauty and potential, carved with the precision of a surgeon and the vision of a poet. And speaking of poets, let's not forget Dante Alighieri, whose Divine Comedy was less about religious devotion and more about a soul-searching journey through heaven, hell, and everything in between. But what really set the Renaissance intellectual boom on fire was the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg's mid-15th century invention was the social media of its day, a game-changer that spread ideas faster than a meme on a millennial smartphone. Before Gutenberg, books were copied by hand, a process so laborious it made watching paint dry seem like extreme sports. But with the printing press, suddenly, books were rolling off the presses in numbers that would make a modern author weep with envy. By 1500, Europe was swimming in published works. Over 20 million copies of 40,000 different volumes had been produced, turning literacy from a luxury into a more accessible reality. The printing press democratized knowledge in a way that had the church clutching its rosary beads. Ideas could now travel beyond the cloisters, and into the hands of anyone who could read, which was becoming an increasingly common skill. This led to a cultural upheaval that was like watching a pot finally boil over after centuries of simmering. Humanist ideas spread like wildfire, and so did more controversial notions, like those from a certain Polish astronomer named Copernicus. His heliocentric theory, which suggested that the Earth was not the center of the universe, was the Renaissance equivalent of dropping a mic in the middle of a Gregorian chant. This intellectual explosion wasn't just confined to the ivory towers of academia. It seeped into the very fabric of society. Universities sprang up across Europe like mushrooms after a rainstorm, with places like the University of Florence becoming hotbeds of debate and discovery. Here, the great minds of the time gathered, their discussions as lively as a tavern brawl, but with fewer black eyes. They were the Renaissance equivalent of a TED talk marathon, tackling everything from the nature of the soul to the mechanics of the universe. But while humanism encouraged individual thought, it also laid the groundwork for social change. It was the intellectual spark that would eventually ignite the Reformation, a movement that challenged the Church's authority and forever altered the religious landscape of Europe. Martin Luther, armed with his 95 Theses and a printing press, took these ideas and ran with them, leading to a schism that would make any family feud look tame by comparison. The Renaissance was also a time when science and art intertwined like a beautifully choreographed dance. Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance man, was dissecting cadavers one moment and painting the Mona Lisa the next. His notebooks, filled with sketches and musings, were a testament to his insatiable curiosity. Leonardo wasn't just a painter. He was an architect, an engineer, and an inventor, dreaming up contraptions that wouldn't become reality for centuries. He was like a one-man Google search, exploring everything from flight to anatomy with a relentless passion for discovery. Yet, for all its high-minded ideals, the Renaissance was not without its darker side. The same spirit of inquiry that fueled humanism also led to the questioning of long-held beliefs, sparking conflicts that were as bloody as they were transformative. The Inquisition was the Church's heavy-handed response, a grim reminder that not everyone was on board with this new wave of thought. Galileo Galilei would later find himself in the Church's crosshairs, his advocacy for Copernican theory landing him under house arrest. His crime, daring to suggest that the Earth wasn't the celestial VIP it was cracked up to be. In the end, the Renaissance was a time of breathtaking change, a roller coaster of intellectual and cultural upheaval that reshaped the Western world. It was an era where ideas collided and combined, creating sparks that would illuminate the path to modernity. From the cobblestones of Florence to the printing presses of Germany, the Renaissance was a testament to the power of human thought and the enduring quest for knowledge. And while the Medici might have bankrolled the art, it was the humanists who bankrolled the mind, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us today. Stay tuned, because this Renaissance ride is far from over, and there's plenty more to explore in this grand tapestry of history. So, as the Renaissance echoes through time, let's unravel the real legacy of this era. Florence, the epicenter of this cultural tempest, set the stage for modern Western culture with all the finesse of a maestro conducting a symphony. But like any great performance, it came with its share of backstage drama, economic woes, and political turbulence that would make even the most seasoned politician break into a sweat. First up, let's talk economics. Florence wasn't just a city, it was the beating heart of a financial empire, thanks to those ever-ingenious Medici. But the glimmer of gold doesn't last forever. By the late 16th century, Florence was feeling the pinch. The Medici Bank, which once seemed as solid as the Tuscan hills, started to crumble like a poorly baked biscotto. Between bad loans, political meddling, and an inability to adapt to the changing economic landscape, the bank's decline was as inevitable as a plot twist in a telenovela. By 1494, the Medici were temporarily ousted from Florence, and their financial empire came crashing down like a house of cards caught in a Florentine breeze. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe had been catching up, and the discovery of the New World shifted trade routes away from the Mediterranean. Suddenly, Florence's strategic position was as appealing as week-old lasagna. The city's economy sputtered as global commerce pivoted to the Atlantic, leaving Florence with a serious case of FOMO as it watched its economic dominance slip away. And then there's the political chaos. Florence was, in theory, a republic, but calling it that with a straight face requires more than a dash of creative license. The Medici, with their uncanny knack for power plays, ensured that Florence's politics were more tangled than a bowl of spaghetti. But their influence waned as new players entered the scene. The 1494 invasion by Charles Roman VIII of France was the kind of wake-up call that even the deepest slumber couldn't ignore. The French king's ramp through Italy exposed the fragility of Florentine politics and left the city scrambling to regain its footing. Yet, it wasn't just foreign invaders that stirred the pot. The city was a hotbed of internal strife, with factions vying for control like contestants on a reality show, each with their own agenda. The rise of Girolamo Savonarola, the fiery Dominican friar, was a testament to the volatility of the times. His puritanical zeal turned Florence upside down, leading to the infamous bonfire of the Vanities in 1497, where art, books, and trinkets were burned in a frenzy of religious fervor. Savonarola's regime was short-lived, ending with his execution in 1498, but it left an indelible mark, highlighting the city's vulnerability to radical change. As the Renaissance's golden glow began to fade, Florence faced a new reality. It wasn't just the loss of economic and political clout. It was the realization that the city's cultural heyday had come at a cost. The very art and innovation that put Florence on the map had been bankrolled by fortunes that were now dwindling faster than a snowman in a Florentine summer. The city's decline was a sobering reminder that every golden age comes with an expiration date. But was the Renaissance a true rebirth, or a PR masterstroke wrapped in the allure of artistic genius? Let's not kid ourselves. It was a bit of both. The Renaissance did breathe new life into Western thought, challenging medieval conventions with a gusto that would make any rebel proud. Yet, it was also a carefully curated narrative, one that romanticized the past while glossing over the complexities beneath the surface. The art, the architecture, the humanism, these were the Renaissance's lasting gifts, but they were also part of a grand story crafted by the likes of the Medici to cement their legacy. Florence paid the price for its golden age, but it also left a legacy that endures. The Renaissance's impact on art, science, and thought continues to ripple through time, influencing everything from the Enlightenment to modern Western culture. It was a period of contradictions, where beauty and brutality coexisted, where innovation clashed with tradition, and where every masterpiece was a testament to both human creativity and the relentless pursuit of power. As we close the book on this chapter of history, let's remember that the Renaissance was more than just a period of artistic triumph. It was a time of profound change, where the seeds of modernity were sown amidst a backdrop of political intrigue and economic upheaval. Florence may have paid a high price for its moment in the sun, but its legacy is a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity. So, while the city may no longer hold the reins of power, its influence remains as vibrant as the frescoes that line its ancient walls. The Renaissance was, in the end, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a story of rebirth that continues to inspire and captivate, even centuries later. In the ancient world, if there was ever a who's who of architectural marvels, the lighthouse of Alexandria would have been front and center, shining its light like the diva it was. Now, don't let the title lighthouse fool you into thinking it was some quaint little coastal beacon. This was the Bay and Say of lighthouses, commanding attention, inspiring awe, and no doubt causing a bit of envy among its lesser contemporaries. Perched on the small island of Pharos, off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt, it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and for good reason. Let's talk logistics. Constructing this colossal structure wasn't just a matter of plopping down some stones and hoping for the best. Oh no, this was a multi-decade project, stretching over 20 years and completed around 280 BCE during the reign of Ptolemy Roman II Philadelphus. The price tag, a staggering 800 talents of silver, a sum that could fund a small army, or, for the more culinary-minded, buy an Olympic-sized pool filled with garum, the Roman fish sauce du jour. In today's money, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, give or take a few zeros, depending on your ancient currency conversion skills. The lighthouse stood at an estimated 330 feet tall, roughly the height of the Statue of Liberty, minus her pedestal. Imagine that towering over Alexandria, casting its gaze far across the Mediterranean. It was the skyscraper of its day, a monument to human ingenuity and ambition. But as romantic and awe-inspiring as this tale sounds, getting there was no walk in the agora. This Herculean feat required a small army of workers, from architects to laborers, all likely cursing the relentless sun and each other. The construction site must have looked like a bustling ant colony, with workers hauling massive blocks of stone, carving intricate designs, and presumably ruining more than a few togas in the process. Lime dust was the enemy of fashion and respiratory health, but hey, you can't make a wonder of the world without breaking a few eggs, or in this case, ancient lungs. Now let's dispel a persistent myth, the idea that the lighthouse's light was eternal, a beacon that never went out. Romantic, yes. True, no. The reality was far more down to earth, involving wood fires and polished bronze mirrors to project the light. This was no mystical flame fed by the gods, but rather a meticulously maintained fire that required a steady supply of fuel and a dedicated crew to keep it burning. So, the next time someone waxes poetic about the eternal flame of pharaohs, feel free to interject with a healthy dose of historical pragmatism. But why go through all this trouble in the first place? Was it just to guide sailors safely to shore? Well, yes and no. Sure, the lighthouse served a practical purpose, helping to navigate the treacherous waters of the Nile Delta, but it was also a bold declaration of Alexandria's status as a powerhouse of trade, culture, and political clout. By the time the lighthouse was completed, Alexandria was already a bustling metropolis, a melting pot of Greek, Egyptian, and various other cultures, thanks to its strategic location and the vision of its founder, Alexander the Great. Politically, the lighthouse was a statement piece, much like a modern skyscraper with its name emblazoned across the top. It announced to the world that Alexandria was open for business, and not just any business, the kind that involved silk roads, spice routes, and trade winds. It was a beacon of economic prosperity, guiding merchants and traders to its harbors, where goods flowed like the Nile in flood season. Some might say the lighthouse was the ancient equivalent of a city's Instagram account, a curated image designed to impress, attract, and occasionally intimidate. It was a testament to the wealth and ambition of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a dynasty that, let's be honest, loved a bit of grandeur and wasn't shy about flaunting it. For a city striving to outshine Athens and rival Rome, the lighthouse was both a literal and metaphorical spotlight on its achievements. So, what's the takeaway here? The lighthouse of Alexandria wasn't just about guiding ships. It was about guiding an entire civilization into the annals of history. It was a shining example of how human ambition and ingenuity can create wonders that endure in the imagination long after the structures themselves have crumbled. And while the myths surrounding it may be as tall as the lighthouse once was, the reality is even more impressive, a testament to the spirit of an era that dared to reach for the stars, one stone at a time. So, while Alexandria was busy dazzling the ancient world with its lighthouse, let's turn our gaze to Pergamon, where a different kind of spotlight was shining. Nestled in what is now modern-day Turkey, Pergamon was like the intellectual hipster cousin in the Hellenistic family, always trying to one-up the more established cities with something a bit more avant-garde, a bit more cerebral. And how did they plan to do this? With books, of course. Lots and lots of books. Enter the great library of Pergamon, the brainchild of the Attalid dynasty. If Alexandria's library was the archive equivalent of a blockbuster movie, Pergamon's was the indie film that critics couldn't stop raving about. Founded by King Eumenes Roman II in the 3rd century BCE, it was a temple to intellect, housing some 200,000 volumes. Now, before you scoff at that number, remember that these weren't just dusty tomes lying around for decor. Each book was a handwritten manuscript, painstakingly copied by scribes whose hand cramps probably became the stuff of legend. But let's not be naive about the motives here. The library wasn't just about spreading knowledge and enlightenment. Oh no, it was Pergamon's not-so-subtle flex in an ongoing library war with Alexandria. Both cities were vying for the title of intellectual capital of the ancient world, and this was the ancient version of a Cold War arms race. except with scrolls instead of missals. The Pergamene rulers were so serious about their book collection that they allegedly developed parchment as an alternative to papyrus, because, wait for it, Alexandria had cornered the market on papyrus and was playing hardball. Talk about a plot twist worthy of a telenovela. These weren't just dusty academic pursuits, though. This was about power. In the Hellenistic world, knowledge was currency. Having a bigger, better library wasn't just about reading the classics or preserving Aristotle's grocery list. It was about prestige, influence, and ultimately control. Pergamon's rulers were sending a message. We are the intellectual heavyweights here, not just a footnote in history. And while they were at it, they decided to throw in a little architectural grandstanding for good measure. Enter the great altar of Pergamon, a monumental structure dedicated to Zeus and Athena, which was less about piety and more about making a political statement. It was a sprawling masterpiece, with friezes detailing the Gigantomachy, essentially the gods' smackdown on the giants, which was conveniently symbolic of Pergamon's own ambitions. Completed in the 2nd century BCE, this altar wasn't just a place for sacrifices. It was a sacrificial statement piece, if you will. The altar's frieze was a veritable who's who of divine figures, a tapestry of myth and might that was as much about showcasing the city's artistic prowess as it was about religious devotion. The whole thing was a masterstroke of propaganda, using art and architecture to assert dominance in the cultural and spiritual arenas. But let's strip away the romantic veil for a moment. The construction of these grand projects was as much about the sweat and toil of the laborers as it was about the vision of the rulers. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of workers chiseling away under the relentless sun, turning massive blocks of marble into intricate works of art. The costs were astronomical, not just in silver talents, but in human effort. It's easy to get swept up in the grandeur, but remember, these feats were built on the backs of countless laborers who didn't have the luxury of pondering the philosophical implications of their work. They were too busy worrying about the next meal or avoiding the overseer's whip. So, while the legends of Pergamon's library and altar might paint a picture of enlightened rulers and divine inspiration, the reality was a bit more grounded, driven by power, politics, and a touch of ego. The rulers of Pergamon weren't just building monuments. They were crafting a legacy, ensuring that their names would be whispered in the same breath as Alexandria's intellectual giants. And let's be honest, in the ancient world, that was as much about survival as it was about scholarship. In the end, the library war between Pergamon and Alexandria was less about who read the most scrolls and more about who could project the most influence. It was a cerebral chess game played out in marble and manuscripts, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other in the quest for cultural supremacy. So, while we might admire these ancient feats from the comfort of our modern libraries, or let's face it, the glow of our e-readers, it's worth remembering that behind every scroll and stone lies a story of ambition, competition, and a little bit of good, old-fashioned human pettiness. And isn't that the real takeaway? Even in the grand halls of ancient knowledge, sometimes it was less about the pursuit of truth and more about the pursuit of a legacy. As we leave behind the intellectual chess match of Pergamon and Alexandria, let's set sail for Rhodes, where the ancient world decided that bigger was better and subtlety was for the birds. The Colossus of Rhodes. Imagine a 108-foot bronze behemoth casually straddling the entrance to their harbor like it was the world's most audacious bouncer. Spoiler alert, that iconic image is as much fantasy as a unicorn with a day job. Now, before we dive into the engineering nightmare this giant posed, let's tackle the economics of this bronze titan. The Colossus was constructed around 280 BCE, following a successful defense against a siege by Demetrius I of Macedon. To celebrate not being conquered, Rhodes decided, hey, why not build a statue so large it could double as a landmark for the gods? And so they did, using the spoils of war to fund this colossal endeavor. The cost, an estimated 300 talents of silver, a jaw-dropping figure that could have funded a fleet of ships or a few dozen ancient world bakeries to keep everyone in baklava for life. But how do you even start building such a thing? Enter Chairs of Lindos, a sculptor with a penchant for large-scale projects and a disregard for anyone with vertigo. The decision to make the Colossus hollow was less about architectural wisdom and more about necessity. Solid bronze was far too heavy and would likely have ended up as a very expensive pile of scrap metal. Inside this metallic giant was a framework of iron and stone, essentially a skeleton that bore the weight of the outer shell. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a chocolate Easter bunny, impressive on the outside, mostly air on the inside. Despite its awe-inspiring size, the Colossus had a rather undignified stance. Contrary to popular myth, it didn't straddle the harbor entrance with ships sailing between its legs. This romantic image is pure fiction, likely a result of medieval imaginations running wild. The actual statue stood on a pedestal more firmly grounded than the tales suggest. But let's not rob it of all mystique. It was still a marvel of engineering, albeit one that was less eternal monument and more giant target for Zeus's next tantrum. And tantrum he did. The statue's glory was short-lived, barely 3 decades before disaster struck. In 226 BCE, an earthquake rocked Rhodes, toppling the Colossus and leaving it in ruins. The fallen statue lay in pieces, a testament to both human hubris and the whims of nature. For over 800 years, the remnants remained a tourist attraction of sorts, a reminder of the fleeting nature of human achievement. You could say it was the ancient world's version of a cautionary tale about not tempting fate or the gods. The myth-busting doesn't stop there. Despite what Hollywood might suggest, the Colossus wasn't rebuilt. The people of Rhodes consulted the Oracle of Delphi, who, classic cryptic style, advised against reconstruction. Apparently, the Oracle didn't want to risk Rhodian hubris becoming a recurring theme in ancient cautionary tales. Besides, the cost of rebuilding was prohibitive. Those leftover 300 talents didn't magically replenish themselves, and the war spoils had long since been spent on other civic projects. So why did Rhodes go to such lengths to build something that would ultimately become a giant bronze jigsaw puzzle? In the Hellenistic world, the Colossus was more than just a statue. It was a declaration of resilience and prosperity. It was Rhodes flexing its economic and cultural muscles, showing the world it could withstand and triumph over adversity. In a time where power was often measured by the grandeur of one's monuments, the Colossus was a statement, a bronze middle finger to those who doubted them. But let's not overlook the human element. Behind this colossal project were countless workers, artisans, laborers, and architects, whose sweat and toil made the Colossus a reality. These weren't just faceless figures in history. They were people whose lives were consumed by this endeavor, driven by the dreams and ambitions of their rulers. It's a sobering reminder that while history often remembers the grand achievements, it sometimes overlooks those who built them, brick by brick, or in this case, bronze plate by bronze plate. The Colossus of Rhodes, even in its downfall, continues to captivate the imagination. Its story is a blend of ambition, artistry, and a touch of folly. A reminder that while the legends might paint a picture as grand as the statue itself, reality often tells a more grounded tale. And as we move forward in our journey through the Hellenistic world, it's worth keeping in mind that behind every myth lies a kernel of truth, shaped by the hands of those who dared to dream big, even if it meant occasionally toppling over in the process. So, while Rhodes was busy collecting the shattered pieces of its bronze ambition, the Hellenistic world was having its own theatrical moment, quite literally. Enter stage left, the temples and theaters that peppered the sprawling Hellenistic kingdoms. These weren't just places to worship or catch the latest tragedy. They were the social media platforms of their day, broadcasting messages of power, piety, and let's face it, a fair bit of political propaganda. First, let's talk temples. Now, if you think these sacred spaces were purely about divine devotion, let me introduce you to the fine art of religious one-upmanship. Take the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, which was as much about civic pride as it was about worship. Rebuilt in 550 BCE after a fire with the financial backing of the Lydian king Croesus, this wasn't just a place to leave offerings. It was a statement piece, an architectural flex that said, "We've got divine favor and the cash to prove it." This temple was a massive structure, about 377 feet long and 180 feet wide, with more than 100 columns each standing at a whopping 60 feet. The cost. Let's just say Croesus could have bought himself a second kingdom or a lifetime supply of those extravagant Persian carpets. But why stop at awe-inspiring temples when you can also use them as political tools? By bankrolling these monumental projects, Rulers weren't just currying favor with the guards. They were cementing their legacy in the marble and minds of their subjects. In a world where rulers came and went faster than the latest scroll from a traveling bard, ensuring your name was etched into stone was a solid investment in immortality. But temples were just the warm-up act. The real drama unfolded in the theaters. Picture the theater of Dionysus in Athens, nestled on the southern slope of the Acropolis. This wasn't just a venue. It was the birthplace of Western drama, where playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides premiered works that would make or break their careers. With a seating capacity of up to 17,000, this was the ancient world's version of a blockbuster opening night. Theaters were more than cultural hubs. They were the ancient equivalent of the town square, arenas where political and social issues were dissected with the precision of a philosopher's debate. The plays themselves were often loaded with commentary on contemporary politics, veiled critiques of leadership, and explorations of moral dilemmas. Aeschylus wasn't just spinning tales of gods and heroes. He was holding a mirror up to society, asking the audience to reflect on their own world. And speaking of political theater, let's not forget the theater of Epidaurus, renowned for its near-perfect acoustics. Built in the 4th century BCE, it could seat around 14,000 spectators. The real genius here was the design. Every whisper on stage could be heard in the uppermost seats without the need for an ancient megaphone. This wasn't just about showcasing architectural prowess. It was about control. Rulers didn't just want to entertain the masses. They wanted them to hear every word, every nuance of the message being conveyed. In a world where oral tradition was king, ensuring your voice carried was as powerful as commanding an army. Of course, these grand structures came with grand costs. Constructing a theater was no small feat, often requiring vast sums of money, labor, and resources. But for the rulers who commissioned them, the returns were invaluable. Theaters were a stage for political influence, a place where civic pride could be bolstered, and where the power of persuasion could be exercised in full view of thousands. Yet, let's not get too carried away by the romance of it all. Behind the grandeur lay the reality of human toil. The laborers who carved out these colossal stone seats, the artisans who crafted the intricate reliefs. These were the silent architects of history, whose contributions were often overshadowed by the fame of the playwrights and the glory of the rulers who funded these projects. It's a sobering thought that while the elite gathered to watch the latest performance, the workers were likely dealing with calloused hands and aching backs. The dual role of these structures, temples and theaters alike, was unmistakable. They were both sacred and secular, spiritual and political, places where the divine and the mundane intersected. In the Hellenistic world, the lines between these realms were as blurred as a philosopher's vision after a night at the symposium. Temples were not just about piety, they were about power. Theaters were not just about entertainment, they were about influence. And in both cases, the goal was the same, to shape society according to the will of those who held the reins of power. So, as we wrap up this act and prepare for the next scene, remember this. In the Hellenistic world, architecture was never just about bricks and mortar. It was about messages and meanings, about who's in charge and who's listening. Temples and theaters were the Facebook and Twitter of their day, broadcasting messages far and wide, and ensuring that those in power stayed in power. They were the stages upon which the drama of history unfolded, each stone a testament to the ambition, ingenuity, and occasionally the sheer audacity of the human spirit. As we prepare to delve deeper into these ancient marvels, let's keep our eyes peeled for the stories etched in every column and carved in every seat, stories that continue to echo through time, long after the final curtain has fallen. All right, we've meandered through the grandiose streets of Hellenistic cities, awed at their towering lighthouses, intellectual libraries, and colossal statues. But what does it all mean for us today, as we sit in our modern cities with skyscrapers that reach higher than the ambitions of ancient kings? Let's peel back the layers of history and see just how these ancient feats continue to echo through the corridors of our concrete jungles. First up, let's debunk the myth that these ancient marvels were purely for the love of art and culture. Spoiler alert, they were the ancient world's version of a viral TikTok, designed to grab attention, show off wealth, and assert dominance. The lighthouse of Alexandria wasn't just lighting the way to safe harbors. It was a blaring neon sign screaming, "Alexandria, open for business." It was a beacon of economic prowess. And let's not forget, a little bit of my lighthouse is bigger than yours. Fast forward to today, and what do we see? The Burj Khalifa, the Petronas Towers, modern equivalents of these ancient PR stunts, reaching skyward to declare their cities as epicenters of commerce and innovation. And speaking of innovation, the Hellenistic architects were like the Steve Jobs of their time, pioneers who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The use of marble, the precision of their engineering, the sheer audacity of their scale, these were the precursors to our modern feats of engineering. Take the Parthenon in Athens, with its optical illusions and architectural tricks designed to correct the imperfections of human vision. Today, we have architects using technology to create buildings that twist, turn, and defy convention, all while standing tall against nature's wrath. It's a testament to human ingenuity that spans millennia. But let's not get too misty-eyed over these ancient wonders. Behind every marble column and bronze statue were laborers, thousands of nameless, faceless workers who toiled under the relentless sun, their contributions overshadowed by the glory of their rulers. This was history's unsung workforce, the real heroes who turned dreams into reality. It's a story as old as time. The few bask in the spotlight, while the many toil in the shadows. A reality check for our modern world, where the divide between the celebrated and the unseen remains as stark as ever. And what of those grand libraries, those repositories of knowledge that were as much about hoarding power as they were about preserving wisdom? The great library of Alexandria was more than just a collection of scrolls. It was a symbol of intellectual might, a cultural weapon wielded by those who knew that in the Hellenistic arms race, knowledge was the ultimate currency. Today, our digital libraries store more information than the ancients could have ever dreamed. Yet the struggle for intellectual dominance continues, played out on the battlegrounds of servers and gigabytes. Meanwhile, the theaters and temples stood not just as places of worship and entertainment, but as platforms for political discourse and social commentary. These were the Twitter feeds of their day, where playwrights could critique leadership and question societal norms, all while entertaining the masses. In our era of social media, the message remains the same. Influence is power, and those who control the narrative often control the outcome. So, what's the legacy of these Hellenistic wonders, these ancient echoes that still shape the world around us? They remind us of the enduring human drive to create, to innovate, to build monuments that proclaim our existence and aspirations to future generations. They are a testament to the fact that while the tools and materials may change, the desires and motivations remain strikingly similar. We still seek to impress, to inspire, and yes, to outdo one another in the grand theater of human achievement. In the grand tapestry of history, the Hellenistic period stands out as a time of unparalleled ambition and creativity. It was a vibrant era where the boundaries of the known world were stretched, not just geographically, but intellectually and architecturally. These were the projects that sparked imaginations, fueled rivalries, and left a legacy that even today, centuries later, continues to inspire architects, engineers, and dreamers. But let's not forget the flip side. These architectural feats were also exercises in vanity, demonstrations of power. And let's face it, gigantic ego trips that often came at a significant cost, both in human effort and resources. They were ancient world versions of the keeping up with the Joneses mentality, but on a monumental scale. So, while it's easy to romanticize these achievements, it's crucial to remember the underlying realities, the sweat, the labor, the politics, and the human cost that made these wonders possible. In conclusion, the architectural feats of the Hellenistic kingdoms were much more than stones and mortar. They were embodiments of human ambition, reflections of a society striving for greatness, and at times, reminders of the follies of hubris. As we gaze upon our own modern marvels, let us take a moment to appreciate the echoes of the past that have shaped our present, and perhaps learn a lesson or two from those ancient dreamers who dared to reach for the heavens, even if it meant sometimes getting burned along the way. If you were a teenager in ancient Rome, your life would likely revolve around toga parties and philosophical debates. But if you were Octavian, nephew of Julius Caesar, your life took a sharp left turn into the political fast lane in 44 BCE, when Caesar, the man who was supposed to be the Roman Republic's eternal big cheese, met his end at the sharp end of 23 daggers. Suddenly, Octavian found himself the heir to Caesar's fortunes and ambitions. Surprise! You're 18, and now you're kind of a big deal. Let's start with the plot twist that would make any soap opera writer jealous. The reading of Caesar's will. You might think wills are boring legal documents, but not this one. In a move that shocked Rome more than finding out Caesar had been dining with Cleopatra, this last will and testament revealed that the young Octavian, a lad barely old enough to vote, was named Caesar's adopted son and principal heir. This wasn't just an inheritance of wealth. It was a transfer of gravitas, a golden ticket to power. Cue the dramatic music. Now, you might picture Octavian as a wet-behind-the-ears teen, obliviously stumbling into the role of a lifetime. But let's be honest, this kid was no wide-eyed novice. He had ambition sharper than a Roman gladius and a mind as calculating as an abacus. The first thing he did was lean into the name change, going from Gaius Octavius to Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. Because if you're trying to ride the coattails of greatness, you might as well take the full name, right? With his newfound identity, Octavian embarked on a mission to consolidate power that would make the most ruthless corporate raider look like a friendly neighborhood grocer. He understood that in Roman politics, friends are just future enemies in disguise, so he started building alliances like he was playing a high-stakes game of Risk. He even managed to get the Senate to affirm his position, a move that required more charm and cunning than a cat burglar at a jewelry store. But let's not kid ourselves. Octavian's rise wasn't all smooth sailing and triumphant parades. There were bumps, particularly in the form of Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, and at this point, a rival with ambitions as sky-high as the Colosseum ceiling. Antony was no pushover. He was a seasoned general and a charismatic leader. In the game of Roman thrones, you couldn't just waltz into power without stepping on some toes, and Antony's were the biggest around. So, what's a young upstart to do? Enter the first of Octavian's masterstrokes, marry into power. He formed an alliance with Antony through marriage, tying his sister Octavia to Antony. It was a move straight out of the political playbook, with a side of soap opera drama. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a strategic maneuver to keep Antony close and his ambitions in check. Of course, no good alliance is complete without a bit of PR magic. Octavian wasn't just a politician. He was a spin doctor before spin doctors were cool. He knew the value of image and perception in a way that would make modern influencers take notes. His early propaganda campaigns were a blend of genius and absurdity. He portrayed Antony as a debauched lover of Eastern pleasures, all while painting himself as the virtuous young Roman, a true son of Rome. This was more than just politics. It was theater, and Octavian was the star, director, and producer. Despite the myth of the innocent heir, Octavian's strategies were as ruthless as they were savvy. He understood the currency of loyalty and how to buy it, literally. He distributed money from Caesar's estate to the Roman citizens, fulfilling Caesar's promises and endearing himself to the public. He was like the ancient Roman version of a benevolent billionaire, handing out free bread with a side of political allegiance. But let's get real for a moment. Octavian wasn't just about the gifts and good PR. He was a master of realpolitik, knowing when to play nice and when to bare his teeth. Behind the youthful facade was a strategist who knew that power is never given, it's taken. And Octavian was more than willing to take it, one calculated step at a time. As he navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics, Octavian built a loyal base among the army, the real kingmakers of the time. He rallied Caesar's veterans to his cause with promises of power and prosperity, a move that cemented his position as a military leader. By 43 BCE, just a year after the Ides of March had turned his life upside down, Octavian had secured his first consulship, a staggering achievement for someone barely out of his teens. And while he was busy climbing the political ladder, Octavian never lost sight of the ultimate goal, consolidating power and avenging Caesar's murder. The stage was set for the showdown with the assassins, Brutus and Cassius, and their supporters. But that's a story for another time. For now, let's just say that Octavian's rise was anything but accidental. It was a calculated ascent by a young man who understood the game of power better than most seasoned players. In the end, Octavian was more than just the adopted heir of Caesar. He was a visionary with a plan, a strategist who saw the chessboard of Rome and made his moves with precision. Behind the legend of the innocent heir was a leader who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. As Rome's political landscape shifted like sand in a desert storm, Octavian was there, seizing every opportunity, turning every challenge into a stepping stone. The boy who was thrust into the spotlight was a man who would redefine an empire one shrewd decision at a time. And so, with the stage set and the spotlight firmly on him, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, was ready to take his place as the architect of a new era. Fast forward to 31 BCE, and we find ourselves at the Battle of Actium, a naval clash that was less Pirates of the Caribbean and more Game of Thrones on water. Octavian squared off against Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and spoiler alert, it wasn't the star-crossed lovers who sailed away with the victory. This battle wasn't just about ships and strategy. It was the moment when Octavian cemented his path to supremacy. With Antony and Cleopatra out of the picture, it was time for Octavian to play the long game. Now, let's talk about the transformation of Rome from republic to empire. Octavian wasn't about to pull a Julius Caesar and declare himself dictator for life. He'd learned from his adoptive father's unfortunate end that such moves could be hazardous to one's health. Instead, Octavian was more subtle, more calculating. In 27 BCE, he took the title Augustus, a name that not only sounded like something pulled from a divine laundry list, but also meant the revered one. It was a classic rebranding move, like when your favorite fast food chain suddenly starts serving organic kale smoothies. Cunning, strategic, and just a bit cheeky. Augustus was a master of optics. He didn't just hold power, he molded it, shaped it, and presented it in a way that made everyone feel like they still had a slice of the political pie. He returned the power of the state to the Senate and the people, or so it appeared. This was Augustus' brilliance. He maintained the appearance of a republic while holding the strings of the empire firmly in his hands. It was political theater at its finest, with Augustus as both director and lead actor. But let's not pretend Augustus was just about the smoke and mirrors. His legal and social reforms were the real deal. Augustus restructured the Roman tax system, making it more efficient and, dare we say, fair. No more tax collectors squeezing every last denarius from the provinces like juice from a particularly unfortunate lemon. He established a standing army and the Praetorian Guard, ensuring his personal safety and the loyalty of Rome's military might. And in a move that would make any modern city planner proud, he initiated extensive building projects, transforming Rome with new roads, temples, and the iconic Ara passes, the altar of peace. Augustus wasn't just building an empire, he was building a legacy. Now, about that myth of Augustus' humble leadership style. Sure, he portrayed himself as the first among equals, the princeps, but let's not kid ourselves. This guy was anything but modest. He wielded power like a maestro conducting an orchestra, with every note playing to his tune. His strategic generosity was legendary. Augustus famously declared that he found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. And marble costs, folks. His patronage wasn't just about philanthropy. It was about crafting an enduring image of prosperity and strength. Augustus knew how to keep the Senate on side too. He made them feel important, even as he quietly ensured they were about as relevant as a toga at a modern-day fashion show. He allowed them to keep their titles and honors while holding the real power close to his chest. The Senate was like that group of friends who think they are making decisions, while in reality, it's Augustus who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. Augustus also understood the importance of public perception. He was the master of propaganda, a precursor to modern spin doctors. His res gesti divi Augusti, a record of his achievements, was like an ancient LinkedIn profile, showcasing his achievements and painting him as the benevolent ruler who brought peace and prosperity to Rome. It was a narrative carefully crafted to ensure his legacy would endure long after he was gone. But let's not get swept away by the romance of it all. Augustus' reign wasn't without its dark side. His consolidation of power came at a cost, and that cost was often paid in the blood of those who opposed him. The proscriptions and purges that marked his rise were a stark reminder that power in Rome was a dangerous game. Augustus was as ruthless as he was strategic, and he didn't shy away from using force when necessary. As Augustus' grip on power tightened, Rome itself was changing. The republic that had once been the heart of Roman identity was giving way to an empire that stretched across the known world. Augustus' reforms and policies laid the foundations for a system that would endure for centuries, a testament to his vision and political acumen. Yet, in the end, Augustus was more than just Rome's first emperor. He was a master of reinvention, a chameleon of power who understood that true leadership was about more than just ruling. It was about creating a narrative that would stand the test of time. Augustus was a man who took the chaos of the Roman Republic and forged it into an empire that would become the cornerstone of Western civilization. And while his methods were often as brutal as they were brilliant, there's no denying that Augustus' legacy is one that looms large over history, a testament to the power of ambition and the art of statecraft. So, as we leave Augustus on the cusp of his empire, let's remember that his story is far from over. The boy who was thrust into power would go on to shape the destiny of Rome, and in doing so, lay the groundwork for the world as we know it today. Stay tuned, because the tale of Augustus is one that continues to unfold, with twists and turns that would make even the most seasoned screenwriter take note. As we leave Augustus on the cusp of his empire, let's pivot from the political intrigue and naval battles to the man's flair for urban redecorating. Augustus, and let's be real here, was not just a ruler. He was Rome's original home makeover star, putting even the most ambitious HGTV host to shame. His claim, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble," was more than just a catchy slogan. It was a declaration of his architectural ambitions, a peek into his obsession with cementing his legacy in stone. And of course, it was a wee bit of self-promotion. Now, Augustus wasn't just slapping up buildings for the sake of aesthetics. There was method to his marble madness. Take the Ara Passes, for example. This was no mere altar. Erected in 9 BCE to celebrate his triumphant return from the Gaulish and Spanish provinces, the Ara Passes was a marble masterpiece, a visual mixtape of Augustus' greatest hits. Carved into its sides were images of prosperity and peace, a kind of ancient Instagram feed showcasing Augustus as the benevolent ruler. Peace was a rather subjective term, of course. He did have to stamp out quite a few rebellions to get there, but let's not spoil the narrative. Then there's the Forum of Augustus, a project so grand it would make even the most ambitious city planners blush. Completed in 2 BCE, this architectural marvel wasn't just an ego trip. It was a political statement. Augustus wanted to remind everyone, friends, foes, and future historians, that he was Rome's architect of peace and prosperity. With a price tag that would make a modern fiscal hawk faint, the Forum was a blend of temples, statues, and public spaces, all wrapped in the gleaming sheen of white marble. It was both a physical and symbolic center of the new Roman Empire. But here's the kicker. All these monumental projects weren't just about Augustus making his mark. They were about jobs, lots of them. Rome's population at the time was roughly 1 million strong, and these massive building efforts required a workforce to match. Augustus' building spree was an ancient version of a stimulus package, pumping denarii into the economy by employing thousands of laborers, masons, and artisans. It was economic policy in a toga, offering work and wages to a bustling metropolis where unemployment could lead to unrest faster than you could say, "Senatus consultum." And what about the cost? Oh, the cost. If you think today's megaprojects are pricey, Augustus building bonanza was no bargain. The Ara Passes alone cost an estimated 1,000,000 sesterces, a tidy sum, even by modern standards. The Forum of Augustus was another financial behemoth, though the exact figures are lost to history. What we do know is that Augustus wasn't shy about dipping into his personal coffers, a move that not only demonstrated his wealth, but also endeared him to the Roman populace. After all, who could resist a leader who literally put his money where his mouth was? But let's hold the applause for a moment. While Rome was transforming into a city of marble, life for the average Roman wasn't all grand temples and gleaming altars. The reality of urban living was a world away from the polished facades of Augustus' projects. Most Romans lived in insular, multi-story apartment buildings that were more fire hazards than habitations. These tenements were cramped and unsafe, often prone to collapse faster than a poorly built sandcastle. The grandeur of Rome's public spaces starkly contrasted with the gritty, overcrowded reality of its residential quarters. Yet, the allure of Augustus' architectural achievements was undeniable. His projects were the Instagrammable moments of their time, symbols of Roman strength and stability. They were impressive enough to distract from the less-than-ideal living conditions of many citizens, who, let's face it, were too busy trying to avoid falling debris to worry about the marble-clad monuments. Augustus' Rome was a city of contrasts, soaring achievements and sordid realities coexisting within its bustling streets. Augustus' obsession with building was not just about vanity, though there was plenty of that to go around. It was about legacy, ensuring that his name would be etched into the annals of history as the man who remade Rome. And in this, he was wildly successful. His architectural feats ensured that the city would not only be remembered for its glories, but also serve as a testament to his reign. It's the kind of legacy move that would make even the most ambitious historical figures nod in appreciation. So, while Augustus may have been a master of political theatre, he was also a maestro of marble, composing a cityscape that resonated with the power and prestige of Rome. His projects were more than stone and mortar. They were statements of intent, monuments to his vision, and quite literally, the building blocks of an empire. Augustus may have found Rome a city of bricks, but he left it not just with marble monuments, but with a narrative of transformation that would echo through the ages. As the hammering and chiseling of Augustus' building projects continued to echo through the streets of Rome, the emperor's vision of a marble-clad metropolis was becoming a reality. But the story of Augustus and his architectural legacy is just one chapter in the epic tale of Rome's transformation under his rule. There's more to unravel, more myths to debunk, and more realities to confront as we journey deeper into the reign of Rome's first emperor. So, keep your sandals strapped tight and your togas wrinkle-free, because this story is far from over. We've got more history to explore, more myths to bust, and plenty more marble to admire. Stay tuned. With Augustus' architectural symphony echoing through Rome, let's pivot to the less glamorous, albeit crucial, side of his reign. The military machine that not only kept the empire's borders swelling, but also made sure those marble arches didn't end up as last season's rubble. Augustus, the master strategist, knew that while Rome was busy transforming its skyline, it was equally important to expand its horizon into the Roman legions, those disciplined masses of soldiers who were as much a part of Rome's identity as its senate and its statues. At the peak of Augustus' rule, the Roman military was a force to be reckoned with, numbering around 28 legions. Each legion was a compact unit of roughly 5,000 well-trained soldiers, and let's just say they weren't exactly the ragtag bunch you'd find in a weekend reenactment at your local park. These guys were the real deal, drilled to perfection and ready to march at a moment's notice. The legate, or legion commander, was the man in charge, typically a senator with an appetite for glory almost as insatiable as Augustus' own. Now, let's talk logistics, because moving an army of this size wasn't just a case of shouting to the front and hoping for the best. Imagine trying to organize a family road trip, multiply the complexity by 1,000, and then add the delightful challenge of keeping everyone fed, clothed, and ready to fight. Augustus' military campaigns were as much about supply chains as they were about swords and shields. Feeding a legion required around 30,000 pounds of grain per month. If you're wondering how they managed such a feat without modern logistics, the answer is simple. They didn't. The Roman army often lived off the land, a strategy that was as risky as it was necessary, and occasionally led to some very awkward dinner parties with the locals. Augustus' military endeavors stretched from the sun-baked sands of Egypt to the foggy forests of Germania. His conquests added vast territories to the Roman map, including Egypt, which became the empire's granary, and the Balkans, which added a hefty chunk of Europe to Rome's growing portfolio. But no campaign was without its hiccups, and Augustus found this out the hard way in 9 CE during the ill-fated Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Picture this. 3 entire Roman legions, led by the overconfident Publius Quinctilius Varus, were ambushed by Germanic tribes in a dense forest. The result? A catastrophic defeat that wiped out 15,000 Roman soldiers. Augustus was so distraught that he reportedly roamed the halls of his palace, wailing, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." Not exactly the sort of bedtime story you'd expect from the man who reshaped the Western world. But let's not let one Germanic hiccup overshadow Augustus' broader military achievements. Under his rule, the empire expanded significantly, and his strategic brilliance ensured that the legions were not just conquerors, but also peacekeepers. This duality of purpose was crucial for maintaining control over such a sprawling empire. Augustus established a network of roads, not just for the convenience of ancient Roman tourists, but to allow his legions to move swiftly across the empire. The Via Egnatia, for instance, stretched over 100 kilometers, connecting the Adriatic Sea to Byzantium and facilitating rapid military deployments, a truly impressive feat in an era when horsepower was more literal than figurative. Augustus' legions weren't just about marching and fighting. They were also builders, creating fortifications, bridges, and infrastructure. This not only fortified the Roman territories, but also integrated them, paving the way for cultural and economic exchange. It was a classic Augustus move. Conquer first, then build, then tax. And while the romantic image of the Roman soldier as the invincible warrior persists, the reality was often grittier. Soldiers faced harsh conditions, long campaigns, and the constant threat of disease, which claimed more lives than enemy swords ever did. The Roman army was also a melting pot of cultures, with soldiers coming from various parts of the empire. This diversity was both a strength and a challenge, as it required a delicate balance of discipline and incentive. Augustus, ever the strategist, implemented a system of rewards for veterans, granting them land or money upon retirement. This was less about generosity and more about pragmatism, ensuring a loyal and motivated military force. Yet, Augustus' expansionist dreams were not without economic ramifications. Wars and conquests are expensive undertakings, and while Augustus was adept at squeezing denarii from Rome's purse, the constant need for resources and manpower was a burden on the empire's finances. It's the kind of fiscal headache that would make any modern economist break out in a cold sweat. Despite these challenges, Augustus' military campaigns were instrumental in shaping the Roman Empire's identity. They were a testament to his vision of a Rome that was as formidable as it was expansive. His ability to juggle military might with statecraft was a key factor in his enduring legacy, even if it occasionally led to the kind of logistical nightmares that would have made even the most seasoned general reach for a cup of wine. As we delve deeper into Augustus' reign, it's clear that his military strategies were as multifaceted as the man himself. Rome's expansion was not just a tale of battles and borders. It was a complex dance of diplomacy, economics, and sheer force of will. Augustus' military machine was a marvel of ancient engineering, a testament to his ability to wield power with precision and foresight. So, while Augustus' Rome was a city of marble, his empire was one of legions. The soldiers who marched under his banner were more than just warriors. They were the backbone of his rule, the enforcers of his vision, and the guardians of an empire that would echo through history. As we continue to unravel the story of Augustus, remember that the legacy of Rome's first emperor was built not just on stone and mortar, but on the iron and blood of the legions who brought his dreams to life. Stay tuned, because the saga of Augustus is far from over, and there's still much ground to cover, literally. With Augustus' military machine rumbling across the empire, you might think the man was content to rest on his laurels. But if there's one thing Augustus wasn't, it was complacent. Real ace up his toga was his knack for succession planning, a political tightrope act that would put Cirque du Soleil to shame. You see, Augustus knew that power was a slippery eel, and he wasn't about to let it wriggle away after he was gone. Augustus had a revolving door of potential heirs, each one seemingly groomed for greatness, only to be unceremoniously shuffled off this mortal coil. First, there was Marcellus, his nephew and the apple of his eye, who tragically died young. Then came Agrippa, Augustus' trusted general and son-in-law, who stepped into the heir-apparent's shoes until he too succumbed to an untimely death. Next in line were Gaius and Lucius, Augustus' grandsons by adoption, but they both met their maker far too soon. If Augustus had a family motto, it might have been "Life's a battlefield, and the heirs keep falling." Eventually, Augustus settled on Tiberius, his stepson through his wife Livia. Tiberius wasn't exactly the picture of charisma. Think of him as the Eeyore of Roman politics, but he was competent, a seasoned military commander, and most importantly, alive. Augustus adopted Tiberius and forced him into a series of ever-increasing responsibilities, culminating in a joint consulship in 13 CE. By the time Augustus shuffled off his own mortal coil in 14 CE, Tiberius was poised to take the reins, whether he liked it or not. But Augustus wasn't just about practical succession planning. He was also a master of posthumous branding. Upon his death, Augustus was deified or turned into a god in a move that was more about political strategy than celestial promotion. This divine makeover wasn't an unprecedented honor. Julius Caesar had pulled the same trick, but it was a brilliant way to legitimize the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Augustus was now not just a name in the annals of history, but a divine figure, lending an air of divine right to his successors. It was like the ultimate LinkedIn endorsement, except with temples and priests instead of recommendations from former co-workers. Yet, as with all legends, the myth of Augustus as the benevolent, god-like ruler glosses over a few unsavory details. His reign was marked by ruthless political machinations, including a penchant for purging his enemies with the enthusiasm of a particularly zealous spring cleaner. Augustus didn't just consolidate power, he sculpted it, trimming away rivals with the precision of a master gardener pruning a rose bush. His political strategies were often as brutal as they were effective, a reminder that behind every great empire is a trail of metaphorical, and sometimes literal, bodies. Augustus' legacy is a complex tapestry of ambition, strategy, and a dash of divine PR. He crafted a narrative of peace and prosperity, but the reality was a balancing act of power plays and political theater. His reign laid the foundations for the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace that lasted over 2 centuries, yet it was a peace maintained by the iron grip of Roman legions and the ever-watchful eye of imperial authority. Augustus understood that true power wasn't just about conquest, it was about control of the narrative, the state, and the future. In modern terms, Augustus was the ultimate brand manager. He knew how to craft an image, whether it was through monumental architecture, strategic marriages, or deft political maneuvering. His ability to transform Rome from a city of bricks to a city of marble was more than just an architectural achievement. It was a statement of intent, a legacy set in stone. And while the myth of Augustus endures, so too does the reality of his reign, a duality that continues to fascinate and inform our understanding of leadership today. As we reflect on Augustus' legacy, it's clear that his story is more than just the tale of Rome's first emperor. It's a study in the art of power, the shaping of identity, and the crafting of a narrative that would echo through history. Augustus was a man who understood that history is written not just by the victors, but by those who know how to tell their story. His reign was a masterclass in the politics of perception, a lesson that resonates in today's world of spin, spectacle, and strategy. So, as we close the book on Augustus' story, let's remember that his legacy is not just one of marble monuments and military might. It's a testament to the enduring power of narrative, the complexity of leadership, and the timeless dance of ambition and authority. Augustus may have left the world 2 millennia ago, but his story continues to unfold, a reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting for us to rediscover it, one marble column at a time. Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen of Ireland, was born around 1530, when the Emerald Isle was a patchwork quilt of clashing clans and ambitious chieftains. Toss in a cauldron of English interference, a sprinkle of Spanish influence, and you have the messy, delicious stew that was 16th century Ireland. Grace, or Grain Mhaal, as she was known in Gaelic, popped into existence in County Mayo, a place as rugged as the cliffs that guarded her family's fortunes. Her father, Owen O'Malley, was a chieftain with a side hustle in piracy and trade, a well-rounded entrepreneur of the high seas, if you will. Now, Owen wasn't just any pirate. He was the CEO of his own little maritime empire. He commanded a fleet of ships and controlled the waters off the west coast of Ireland, where the Atlantic was as unpredictable as a cat with a laser pointer. This seafaring life wasn't just for plunder, it was about survival. In a land where English laws were as welcome as a skunk at a garden party, the O'Malleys carved out their own rules, and young Grace was learning from the best. Growing up, Grace was the kid who didn't just want to play with dolls. She wanted to commandeer the toy chest. Legend has it that she once demanded to join her father's sea voyages, only to be told that her long hair would get tangled in the ship's ropes. In true defiant fashion, she grabbed some scissors and chopped it all off, earning her the nickname Grain Mhayal, or Bald Grace. Whether this tale is fact or fiction, it certainly captures her spirit. When life gives you lemons, make a bold fashion statement. Grace's world was one of shifting alliances and family feuds that made Game of Thrones look like a friendly game of chess. The O'Malleys were part of the Gaelic nobility, a society with its fair share of codes, honor, and backstabbing. But unlike the polished courtly dances of Europe, this was a raw, untamed dance with survival. The English were tightening their grip on Ireland, and the Gaelic lords were trying to maintain their independence, often by any means necessary. Enter Grace's marriage to Donal O'Flaherty, a political move that offered more than just a new surname. Donal had ambitions, and with Grace by his side, they formed a formidable partnership. This wasn't some fairy tale romance. It was a strategic alliance. Think of it as the 16th century equivalent of a corporate merger, complete with hostile takeovers and territorial disputes. Donal, known as Donal of the Battles, had his own fleet of ships and a reputation to match. Together, they expanded their operations, which included everything from trading in Spanish wine to the occasional bout of good old-fashioned piracy. The waters of Clew Bay became their playground, and the couple was soon known for their cunning maneuvers and daring raids. In those days, piracy wasn't just about gold and glory. It was a necessary evil in an economy where the English crown was tightening its stranglehold. The O'Malleys and O'Flahertys were like the local grocery store, offering goods that were hard to come by thanks to English embargoes. And if the English wanted to label them outlaws, well, they'd wear that badge with pride. Grace's early ventures into piracy were less about swashbuckling adventure and more about keeping her clan fed and her enemies at bay. She understood the delicate balance of power, and she played the game with the skill of a seasoned chess master. Her ships were her castles, her crew her loyal subjects. They raided English ships, collected tolls from those who dared to sail her waters, and built a network of alliances that kept their enemies guessing. In this world of saltwater politics, Grace wasn't just another pirate. She was a force to be reckoned with. Her knowledge of the sea was unmatched, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Gaelic and English politics was nothing short of genius. She was a leader who earned her crew's respect through sheer grit and determination. Grace's story is often wrapped in romantic myths of daring escapades and legendary battles, but the reality was a bit more complex. She was a woman who defied societal norms, a leader who commanded respect, and a strategist who understood the economic realities of her time. She wasn't just fighting for herself, but for her people, her clan, and her way of life. As the 16th century rolled on, Grace O'Malley's legend grew, but so did the challenges she faced. The English crown was not a fan of her entrepreneurial spirit, and tensions were reaching a boiling point. Yet, Grace was never one to shy away from a fight, especially when her freedom and her people were on the line. So, as we leave Grace on the cusp of her greatest challenges, remember that her story is one of grit, tenacity, and a refusal to bow down to the powers that be. She was a woman who charted her own course in a world that tried to confine her to the shores. And this is just the beginning of her tale. And so, with the English crown casting an ever-darkening shadow over the Emerald Isle, Grace O'Malley was about to face a new chapter that would test her mettle in ways even she couldn't predict. Her husband, Donal O'Flaherty, met his demise in 1565, an occupational hazard when your job title includes of the battles. But where others might see a period of mourning or retreat, Grace saw opportunity. With Donal out of the picture, she seized control of his fleet and rallied his clan, proving that grief and ambition can often sail the same ship. Now, let's talk logistics. Grace wasn't just stepping into Donal's shoes. She was strapping on a pair of steel-toed boots and marching straight into command. The fleet she took over wasn't some ragtag band of seafarers. It was a well-oiled machine of about 20 ships. We're talking galleys and caravels, the era's equivalent of a Ferrari and a trusty SUV, respectively. She knew every creak of the deck, every rope and sail, and she knew how to leverage that knowledge to keep her allies close and her enemies at bay. Her first order of business: protect her interests and expand her influence. Those waters off the west coast of Ireland were still teeming with English ships, like a game of battleship where nobody had the courtesy to stay in their own lane. Grace launched daring raids, targeting English vessels with a precision that would make a surgeon jealous. A notoriety spread faster than gossip at a medieval banquet, and her enemies found that crossing her was as advisable as poking a bear with a short stick. One of Grace's most audacious exploits involved a raid on the Earl of Desmond's lands, boldly executed while the Earl was otherwise occupied, likely plotting his own power plays. Grace and her crew marched in, relieved the Earl of his cattle, and sailed off into the sunset, leaving him to chew on his misfortune. Nowadays, we might call that grand theft bovine, but back then, it was a calculated risk in the game of Gaelic thrones. Her ability to turn even the simplest of raids into a strategic masterstroke was legendary. But don't let the legends fool you into thinking it was all swashbuckling bravado. Grace's life as a pirate wasn't all high seas glamour. Crew members didn't sign up for the dental plan or a 401k. They signed up for a life where the line between feast and famine was as thin as a ship's plank. Grace ensured that her crew was well fed and motivated, which was no small feat. The economics of piracy meant that every raid had to count. A single successful haul could feed a clan for weeks, while a botched attempt could spell disaster. Grace's interactions with other Irish chieftains were as complex as a Shakespearean play, minus the soliloquies, unless you count the occasional drunken sea shanty. Her alliances were as fluid as the tides, shifting based on who could offer the most strategic advantage. She worked with the O'Neills and the O'Donnells, leveraging their shared opposition to English encroachment like a high-stakes game of chess, where the board was the entire west coast of Ireland. And then there's the tale of Grace, allegedly shaving her head to join her father's voyage, which paints her as a rebellious, take-no-prisoners kind of gal. But let's question the romanticized narrative for a second. Sure, it's a great story. Who doesn't love the image of a defiant young woman defying societal norms with one bold snip? But the reality is more complex. Whether or not she actually shaved her head, Grace understood that piracy wasn't just about personal freedom. It was about survival in a world that offered few options for women to wield power. The romanticism of piracy often overlooks its harsh realities. The sea was unforgiving, and life aboard a ship was a constant dance with danger. Storms could appear without warning, and enemy ships weren't inclined to play nice. It was a world where strength and cunning were currency, and Grace had both in spades. She navigated these treacherous waters with a blend of charisma, intelligence, and sheer force of will that left even the most seasoned sailors in awe. While her maritime exploits made her a legend, Grace's real power came from her ability to adapt and evolve. She wasn't just a pirate. She was a businesswoman, a politician, and a warrior. Her keen understanding of the economic and political landscape allowed her to maintain a delicate balance of power. She knew when to fight, when to negotiate, and when to retreat, skills that served her well as the English continued to tighten their grip. So, as Grace's story continues to unfold, remember that we're not just talking about a pirate queen with a penchant for adventure. We're talking about a woman who redefined what it meant to lead, who carved her own path in a world determined to keep her anchored to the shore. In the next chapter of her tale, we'll see how she navigates the increasingly choppy waters of English-Irish politics, proving that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with swords, but with shrewd strategy and a fearless heart. Stay tuned, because Grace O'Malley's story is far from over, and the best is yet to come. As Grace O'Malley's tale sails forward, her legend as a pirate queen was about to clash with the meticulous order of the English court. You see, in 1593, Grace decided it was time to have a little tete-a-tete with none other than Queen Elizabeth I. Yep, our Irish seafaring rebel was aiming for a showdown with the Tudor monarch herself. This was not your typical pirate story, no parrots on shoulders, just two powerful women with more in common than you might think. Let's set the scene. Ireland was under the increasing grip of English control, like a boa constrictor slowly tightening its coils. The English crown, always eager to expand its empire, viewed Ireland as a troublesome appendage in need of some serious administrative TLC. And who was at the helm of this imperial ambition? Our dear Elizabeth, a queen with a penchant for ruffles and ruling with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Grace, on the other hand, was facing some economic pressures of her own. Her maritime operations were becoming riskier as the English navy grew bolder. It wasn't just about the threat of English guns. The economic blockade they imposed was squeezing the life out of local economies. So Grace did what any savvy businesswoman would do. She sought a strategic partnership, or at least a ceasefire. Now, let's talk about the myths surrounding this legendary meeting. There's a tale floating around that Grace refused to bow to Elizabeth. It's a juicy story, all right. A rebellious pirate standing tall before the Queen of England, refusing to bend the knee. But let's put our historian hats on for a second. The reality might be less romantic. Grace, shrewd as ever, likely knew when to hold her cards close and when to show her hand. She was there to negotiate, not to provoke. Historical records do suggest that Grace spoke in Irish, which Elizabeth, with her many talents, probably didn't understand. So, Grace needed a translator. Imagine the scene. A pirate queen arguing a case in a language as wild and untamed as the Atlantic, while Elizabeth, decked out in her finest regalia, waited for the translation. It's like a high-stakes poker game where neither player speaks the same language but both understand the value of a good bluff. And what was at stake? Land, freedom, and a little thing called survival. Grace petitioned the Queen to release her son, Tibart Burke, who was held prisoner by the English, also sought to reclaim her rightful inheritance, which the English had a nasty habit of appropriating with the subtlety of a bulldozer. Elizabeth, ever the pragmatist, saw the value in keeping Grace on her side, or at least out of her hair. After all, having Grace O'Malley as an ally might ease the English crown's headaches in Ireland. So, a deal was struck. Grace got her son back and a promise, a rather slippery promise, knowing Elizabeth, that her lands and rights would be respected. In return, she agreed to curb her piratical activities, a concession that brought a temporary peace to the stormy seas. But let's not kid ourselves. This was no fairy tale ending. The English were notorious for making promises as solid as a house of cards in a hurricane. Grace knew she was playing a dangerous game, but she was no stranger to high risks. She understood the economic landscape better than most, recognizing that peace, however temporary, could be as profitable as piracy. This meeting was more than just a historical footnote. It was a testament to Grace's political savvy. Here was a woman who challenged gender roles, not with grand speeches, but with actions that spoke louder than words. She navigated the choppy waters of English-Irish politics with the precision of a seasoned captain, proving that sometimes the most effective weapon is a sharp mind and a well-timed negotiation. For Elizabeth, meeting Grace was a reminder that power comes in many forms. Here was another woman who wielded influence not through birthright, but through sheer will and wit. It was a rare moment in history, a confrontation that wasn't about swords or cannons, but about two women, each leading in their own way, each fighting for their place in a world dominated by men. As the dust settled from this historic encounter, both women returned to their respective realms. Grace continued her life on the seas, a little wiser and perhaps a little more cautious. Elizabeth returned to her court, likely with a new appreciation for the complexities of Irish politics and the formidable woman who dared to challenge her. So, while the legends of their meeting may be draped in romanticism, the reality was a dance of diplomacy and strategy. Grace O'Malley was not just a pirate. She was a strategist, a leader, and a woman who refused to be defined by the limits of her time. Her meeting with Elizabeth was not an end, but a new chapter in her story, one that continued to defy expectations and redefine what it meant to be a leader in a world that was as unpredictable as the sea itself. Stay tuned, because the saga of Grace O'Malley is far from over, and the tides of history have many more waves to ride. Grace O'Malley's saga, like any good pirate tale, was full of twists and turns, but this was far from the final chapter. After her historic meeting with Elizabeth I, Grace returned to the choppy waters of the west coast of Ireland, where her legacy was still in the making. The English might have offered a tentative peace, but Grace knew that in the world of politics, promises were about as reliable as a wooden leg in a termite colony. Despite her brief truce with the English crown, Grace wasn't about to hang up her sword and start knitting. Instead, she continued to navigate the political and economic storm brewing over Ireland with the skill of a seasoned sailor. Her clan, the O'Malleys, was still the heartbeat of her existence, a tribe in desperate need of her leadership, as the English continued to tighten their grip like a boa constrictor with a mean streak. Now, the economics of piracy might sound thrilling, but let's take a closer look at the arithmetic of rebellion. Grace's raids on English ships weren't just about keeping her crew in rum and sea shanties. They were about survival. Each successful raid was a tangible lifeline for her people, bringing in much-needed goods that the English blockade tried its best to stifle. You see, in those days, a single captured cargo could mean the difference between feast and famine for entire communities. Grace's operations were an economic engine for her region, a fact that didn't escape the notice of the English authorities. Her continued resistance was a thorn in their side, and by the 1590, the tides of power were shifting. The English were determined to transform Ireland into a well-oiled part of their imperial machine, applying pressure with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. For Grace, maintaining her family's power became a daily battle, one fought not just on the seas, but in the intricate web of Gaelic politics. Despite her best efforts, the political landscape was changing faster than you could say cannonball. The English, with their relentless push for control, were altering the traditional Gaelic way of life. Chieftains who once wielded power with the autonomy of mini-monarchs were now finding themselves more like vassals in a game where the rules were written in London. Grace, ever the strategist, worked tirelessly to keep her clan relevant in this new world order. But here's where the legend starts to fray at the edges. While tales of her exploits paint Grace as an indomitable pirate queen, the reality was more nuanced. The English were playing a long game, one that involved not just military might, but economic and political maneuvering that would have put Machiavelli to shame. Grace's influence, while formidable, began to wane under the relentless pressure of English authority. Let's talk specifics. By the late 16th century, English policies were like a noose tightening around the Gaelic way of life. The statutes of Kilkenny and various decrees aimed to erase Irish customs, languages and laws, replacing them with English ones. Grace, with her Gaelic roots, was caught in the crossfire of cultural erosion. Her ability to command respect and loyalty was increasingly challenged by the English push for assimilation, a strategy that was as subtle as a bull in a china shop. Yet, Grace wasn't just going to roll over and accept defeat. Her efforts to maintain her family's power were marked by a fierce tenacity. Even as her influence diminished, she remained a figurehead of resistance. Her story was a rallying cry for those who longed for the days when Irish chieftains ruled their lands without foreign interference. As the English grip tightened, Grace became a symbol of defiance, a reminder of what once was and what might still be. The economic impacts of her actions were felt across her clan and region. By defying English rule, she not only provided for her people, but also kept alive the spirit of independence that was quickly becoming a rare commodity. Her raids, while risky, were a vital part of the local economy, ensuring the flow of goods in a time when access was increasingly restricted by English control. But let's not sugarcoat it. The decline of Grace's influence was as inevitable as the tide. The English were relentless, and their methods, though crude, were effective. Her story, while one of resistance, is also a tale of adaptation. Grace knew when to fight and when to negotiate, but the political and social factors shaping Ireland were a tidal wave that even she couldn't stop. As her legend grew, so did the myths surrounding her life. Stories of her exploits took on a life of their own, painting her as an almost mythical figure. Yet, beneath the romantic veneer was a woman who fought against the odds, who played the cards. She was dealt with a skill that was nothing short of extraordinary. Grace O'Malley's legacy as the Pirate Queen is a testament to her resilience, but it also serves as a sobering reminder of the harsh realities of her time. In examining Grace's later years, we see a woman who, despite the odds, continued to fight for her place in a rapidly changing world. Her story isn't just about piracy or rebellion. It's about the struggle to maintain identity and power in the face of overwhelming adversity. As we delve deeper into her tale, we uncover not just the romanticized image of a pirate queen, but the real woman who stood at the helm of her destiny, refusing to be defined by the constraints of her era. So, as we leave Grace on the cusp of her next challenge, remember that her story is far from over. The tides of history are still turning, and the legend of Grace O'Malley continues to evolve. In our next chapter, we'll explore how her legacy endured long after her sails vanished over the horizon, leaving behind a story that continues to inspire and captivate even today. Stay tuned, because the best legends are the ones that never truly end. As the sun set on Grace O'Malley's sails disappearing over the horizon, her legacy was only just setting anchor. Grace was more than a pirate queen. She was the embodiment of Irish resilience, a living testament to the struggle for autonomy in a world dominated by empires and ambition. Her life was a masterclass in navigating the turbulent waters of power, both on the high seas and in the political arenas of 16th century Ireland. Let's start by debunking some of that romanticized fluff about Grace's life. The tales of her swashbuckling escapades paint a picture of adventure, but they conveniently skip over the grit and grime of reality. Piracy was not a glamorous career choice. It was a high-stakes game of survival. The economic landscape of the time was a minefield, with English embargoes choking the life out of local trade. Grace's raids were not just acts of rebellion. They were essential for feeding her people and keeping her clan afloat. Now, let's talk numbers. Grace commanded a fleet of about 20 ships, a formidable force in her day. Each ship was a floating microcosm of the economy, carrying cargo that could mean the difference between prosperity and poverty for her clan. The spoils of a successful raid, be it English wine, Spanish silks, or cattle liberated from a rival chieftain, were as vital as any war chest. And while her life was a constant balancing act between diplomacy and defiance, her economic acumen was as sharp as any cutlass. But here's where the legend gets a little murky. Grace is often depicted as a Celtic Robin Hood, a romantic notion that glosses over the harsh realities of her life. Sure, she defied English authority, but she also had to contend with the internal politics of Ireland's fractious clans. Her alliances were as fleeting as the Irish weather, shifting with the tides of opportunity and necessity. This wasn't a fairy tale of gallant resistance. It was a gritty saga of resilience in the face of relentless pressure. Yet, despite the odds stacked against her, Grace's legacy endured. She became a symbol of defiance, a beacon for those yearning for a time when Irish chieftains held sway over their own lands. Her story was passed down through generations, a reminder of a time when one woman's courage could stand against the might of an empire. While the English sought to erase the Gaelic way of life, Grace's memory kept the flame of Irish independence flickering in the hearts of her people. In popular culture, Grace O'Malley has been both lionized and mythologized. She's appeared in songs, plays, and films, her image evolving with the times. Yet, while the narratives often lean into the romanticized vision of a fearless pirate queen, they rarely capture the complexity of her life. Grace wasn't just a rebel. She was a savvy leader, a mother, and a strategist who understood the brutal realities of power. Her story is a reminder that history isn't just written by the victors. It's shaped by those who dare to challenge the status quo. So, what does Grace O'Malley's life reveal about the realities of power and survival in 16th century Ireland? For starters, it underscores the precarious nature of autonomy in a world dominated by empire building. The English crown's relentless push for control was a force to be reckoned with, and Grace's story highlights the human cost of resistance. Her life was a testament to the struggle for self-determination, a fight that was as much about identity as it was about politics. Moreover, Grace's legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the seductive allure of myths. While the stories of her exploits capture the imagination, they often obscure the gritty truth of her existence. History isn't just a collection of tales. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of human experience. Grace's story is a reminder that beneath the romantic veneer lies a world of struggle, sacrifice, and survival. In the grand tapestry of history, Grace O'Malley is a thread of defiance, a symbol of a time when the sea was both a barrier and a bridge. Her legacy is a testament to the power of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can chart its own course. As we reflect on her life, we're reminded that history is not just the story of kings and conquerors, but of those who dared to navigate the stormy seas of change. So, as we draw the curtains on Grace O'Malley's tale, let's leave with this thought. History is a sea of stories, and while the waves may wash away the footprints of those who came before, the legends they leave behind continue to inspire. Grace's legacy is a beacon for all who dare to dream of a world where autonomy and identity are worth fighting for. And in the end, isn't that the true essence of a pirate queen? You know, if there's one thing Egyptians knew how to do, it was making everyone else look like they were playing with Lego bricks. Let's talk about the architectural showstoppers of ancient Egypt, starting with the step pyramid of Djoser. This isn't just any pile of stones, it's the architectural equivalent of a mic drop. Built around 2670 BCE, this six-tiered masterpiece stands at a modest 204 feet tall. Sure, it might seem like a toddler compared to the Great Pyramid of Giza, but oh boy, did it pave the way for bigger things. Now, the logistics of building this stone giant are enough to make modern-day construction crews break out in a nervous sweat. Picture this, limestone blocks weighing up to 15 tons each. That's like hauling around a couple of fully grown elephants. And who was doing all this heavy lifting? An estimated 20,000 workers, give or take a few thousand grumblers. These were the guys tasked with not just building a pyramid, but setting the stage for the entire genre of pyramid building that would come after. No pressure. But why go through the hassle of stacking all those blocks in the first place? Was it just to keep the neighbors envious? Partly, yes. The pharaohs weren't exactly known for their humility, but the step pyramid wasn't just a colossal vanity project. It was also a religious monument, a stairway to the heavens for Djoser's eternal afterlife. You see, in ancient Egypt, the afterlife was the ultimate retirement plan, and Djoser wanted to make sure his was the penthouse suite. And let's be honest, if you had the power of a living god and a workforce at your beck and call, you'd probably want a stone stairway to heaven too. Now, let's not sugarcoat the labor conditions here. While the step pyramid is a marvel of human ingenuity, it's also a testament to a labor force that was, shall we say, less than voluntary. We're talking about a workforce that likely included farmers during the off-season, skilled laborers, and yes, slaves. The romantic notion of happy workers whistling while they worked. Yeah, not so much. It was more like a grueling 24/7 construction site with the haunting pressure of divine deadlines. And about those limestone blocks, moving them was no small feat. While today we might call in a few cranes and flatbeds, the ancient Egyptians had to rely on sledges, ropes, and sheer manpower. There's even evidence suggesting they used a clever trick of pouring water on the sand to reduce friction, making it easier to drag those massive stones. It's kind of like ancient physics meets a wet t-shirt contest, minus the shirts, and well, the contest. But the step pyramid was just the beginning. It marked the start of the Old Kingdom's love affair with monumental architecture, which later pharaohs would take to dizzying new heights. Djoser's architect, Imhotep, was the Steve Jobs of his day, revolutionizing Egyptian architecture and earning himself a spot in the history books as a high priest and eventually a god of medicine. Not a bad career path, right? As we peel back the layers of history, the step pyramid stands as a symbol of both religious devotion and royal ego. It's an ancient Instagram post for the pharaohs, a bold statement that shouted, "I was here, and I was awesome." It also set a precedent for future pharaohs who would try to outdo each other with ever more extravagant tombs. Because if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that competitive grandiosity never goes out of style. In the end, the step pyramid is a monument to human ambition and ingenuity, a reminder that sometimes the most daunting challenges can lead to the most impressive achievements. And while we admire its grandeur, it's worth remembering the countless hands that shaped each stone, the lives woven into its very structure. As much as it's a tribute to a single pharaoh, it's a testament to the collective effort and sacrifice of those who built it. So, the next time you're stuck in traffic or waiting in line, just remember, at least you're not dragging a 15-ton block across the desert. Speaking of monumental endeavors, let's shift gears from pyramids to temples. If you thought building tombs was an expensive hobby, wait till you hear about the economic whirlwind surrounding temple construction during Egypt's New Kingdom. We're talking about a time when building temples was like ancient Egypt's version of a government stimulus package, except instead of roads and schools, you got colossal stone complexes dedicated to gods who, let's face it, probably had more gold than they knew what to do with. Let's zero in on one of the grandest of them all, the Karnak Temple Complex. Now, Karnak wasn't just a temple. It was a sprawling metropolis of religious fervor and economic activity, a bit like the Vatican with a side of Wall Street. This wasn't a weekend DIY project. The construction of Karnak spanned over 500 years, with each pharaoh trying to outdo the last by adding their own flair. It's like a historical game of can you top this, with sandstone and hieroglyphs. In terms of sheer scale, Karnak makes your local cathedral look like a dollhouse. Picture this, over 200 acres of land, with a workforce that could rival a small town. We're talking thousands of laborers, artisans, and priests, all buzzing like bees in a hive, each contributing their piece to this architectural juggernaut. And the payoff, a complex that includes the famous hypostyle hall, boasting 134 massive columns, each one a towering 69 feet high. It's the kind of place that would make even the most devout minimalist reconsider their life choices. But here's where it gets really interesting. Temples like Karnak were more than just spiritual centers. They were the economic engines of their time. Think of them as ancient gigafactories, churning out not electric cars, but religious artifacts, food, textiles, and more. These temples were among the largest landowners in Egypt, with vast tracts of farmland, herds of livestock, and a workforce that was more like an army of divine interns. The temples managed everything from grain production to textile weaving, feeding into an economic ecosystem that connected the Nile Delta to the southern reaches of Nubia. Now, before we get too carried away with the sacred grandeur, let's talk economics. The cost of building and maintaining these temples was astronomical. And who footed the bill? Surprise, surprise. It was the common people. Taxes in ancient Egypt weren't paid in cash or credit cards, but in labor and goods. Farmers would tithe a portion of their harvest, artisans would contribute their craft, and those unfortunate enough to be caught without a skill probably just ended up hauling stone blocks. It was a system that kept the temples flush with resources, even if it meant squeezing the peasantry like an overripe pomegranate. And here's a little myth-busting for you. The romanticized image of temples as serene spiritual havens. Not quite. These were bustling hubs of activity, filled with the clamor of construction, the chants of priests, and the everyday hustle of a small city. The temple economy was a well-oiled machine, powered by the labor of countless individuals, some of whom were there by choice, and others by the not-so-gentle persuasion of the state. Karnak wasn't just about worship, it was about power. The pharaohs used these temples as symbols of their divine right to rule, a tangible reminder of their connection to the gods. But it was also a place where political alliances were forged, and where the priests wielded significant influence over both spiritual and temporal matters. In a world where religion and politics were as intertwined as a pretzel, the temples were the epicenter of it all. So, when we talk about the construction of Karnak and other temples, it's not just a tale of stone and sweat. It's a story of economic strategy, political maneuvering, and the complex interplay of faith and power. These temples were a testament to human ambition and ingenuity, but also to the very real costs borne by those who built them. It's a reminder that behind every great monument are the countless lives that contributed to its creation, each stone a chapter in a story that continues to fascinate us thousands of years later. As we marvel at these ancient wonders, it's worth remembering the human element, the workers who toiled under the scorching sun, the artisans who carved each intricate relief, and the communities that supported it all. These weren't just temples, they were the beating hearts of a civilization, as integral to the life of ancient Egypt as the Nile itself. And as much as they were monuments to the gods, they were equally monuments to the people who built them, a testament to the enduring power of human endeavor. As we marvel at these ancient wonders, it's worth remembering the human element, the workers who toiled under the scorching sun, the artisans who carved each intricate relief, and the communities that supported it all. These weren't just temples, they were the beating hearts of a civilization, as integral to the life of ancient Egypt as the Nile itself. And as much as they were monuments to the gods, they were equally monuments to the people who built them, a testament to the enduring power of human endeavor. Now, if temples were the economic engines, then the tombs were the ultimate power play. Let's saunter over to the Valley of the Kings, the final resting place of some of the most famed pharaohs. Talk about location, location, location. This valley was the Beverly Hills of the afterlife. But don't let the arid landscape fool you. These tombs were less about the scenic view and more about political clout and divine PR. The Valley of the Kings wasn't just a cemetery, it was a statement. A pharaoh's tomb was a chance to flex their divine muscles and ensure that their legacy outlived the latest dynasty gossip. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a verified social media account. While the pyramids of the Old Kingdom were all about the skyline, the New Kingdom's pharaohs took a different approach, subtle grandeur hidden beneath the surface. This wasn't about flaunting wealth to the world, but consolidating power within a select circle. You know, like a secret club, where only the coolest rulers had subterranean mansions. Nestled on the west bank of the Nile, the Valley of the Kings became the necropolis of choice around 1539 BCE. The tombs, carved into the limestone cliffs, were a blend of art and engineering, with some stretching over 300 feet into the rock. It wasn't just about making space for the pharaoh's golden goodies. These tombs were labyrinthine fortresses designed to thwart any would-be tomb raiders. And yes, looters were an issue even back then. It seems that human greed has been a constant companion through the ages. But let's not ignore the political chess game at play. Each tomb was a silent declaration of a pharaoh's divine right to rule, an eternal claim that they were the chosen intermediary between the gods and mere mortals. It was a way to solidify their legacy, and by extension, the legitimacy of their successors. The bigger and more elaborate the tomb, the stronger the statement. It's like ancient political propaganda carved in stone. Speaking of stone, let's consider the workforce behind these subterranean palaces. Enter Deir el-Medina, the village of artisans and workers who got the job done. Think of it as the Silicon Valley for tomb builders, a community of skilled laborers who lived and breathed tomb construction. These weren't just any workers. They were the creme de la creme of Egyptian artisans, entrusted with the sacred duty of preparing the pharaoh's eternal homes. Life in Deir el-Medina was surprisingly cushy compared to the average Egyptian's daily grind. For starters, these guys clocked in with schedules that would make any modern-day office worker green with envy. The typical work week, 10 days on, 2 days off. And those days off weren't just for lounging around. There were festivals, family time, and even a bit of leisure thrown in for good measure. In the grand scheme of ancient labor, this was the equivalent of a cushy tech job with unlimited PTO. The village itself was a hive of activity and social interaction. Houses were built with mud brick, and the community was tightly knit, with families living side by side. Education was a priority, with children learning to read and write, skills that were far from common in the ancient world. And let's not forget the healthcare perks. Workers had access to medical care, which, while not exactly cutting edge, was pretty advanced for its time. You could say that Deir el-Medina was ahead of its time, offering a prototype of the modern work-life balance. Economically, the village was well supported. Workers were paid in commodities, grain, beer, and other essentials, which were distributed regularly. It was a system that ensured these artisans were motivated and well-fed, a far cry from the grueling conditions faced by laborers in previous periods. The state had a vested interest in keeping these workers happy because a well-constructed tomb was not just a private affair. It was a public testament to the pharaoh's divine authority. Now, myth-busting time. The romanticized image of ancient Egyptians as a monolithic, hard-working, and unquestioning populace. Not entirely accurate. The folks at Deir el-Medina weren't afraid to voice their grievances. There are records of strikes. Yes, you heard that right. Strikes carried out by workers demanding their overdue rations. Even in ancient times, it turns out workers weren't shy about taking matters into their own hands when the scales tipped against them. Perhaps the world's first example of collective bargaining, these strikes were a testament to the communal spirit and sense of justice that permeated this unique village. But let's not paint an entirely rosy picture. While Deir el-Medina offered a semblance of stability, it was still a life bound by the whims of the ruling elite. The pharaoh's power was absolute, and while the workers enjoyed privileges, they were ultimately at the mercy of the state's changing priorities. When the political winds shifted, so too did the fortunes of these artisans. The balance between privilege and dependency was as delicate as the artwork they carved into the tombs. And speaking of art, let's not forget the incredible craftsmanship that defined the Valley of the Kings. From the vibrant murals depicting the afterlife to the intricate hieroglyphs detailing the pharaoh's journey to eternity, these tombs were masterpieces of ancient art and storytelling. The workers of Deir el-Medina were not just laborers. They were artists, historians, and dreamers leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate us. So, the next time you find yourself marveling at the grandeur of these ancient tombs, remember the stories etched into their walls. These are narratives of power, politics, and the eternal human quest for meaning and immortality. They remind us that, while the pharaohs sought to immortalize their reigns in stone, the true legacy lies in the hands and hearts of those who built them. The Valley of the Kings is more than just a burial ground. It's a testament to the enduring spirit of human ambition and creativity, a monument not only to the rulers it housed, but to the vibrant community that brought these visions to life. And as we leave the dusty cliffs of the valley, the story continues, with more layers of history to unravel and more myths to bust. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the mysteries and marvels of ancient Egypt, where every stone tells a tale, and every tale offers a glimpse into the past that still resonates today. Speaking of mysteries and marvels, let's dive into the nuts and bolts, or should I say, the stones and sweat, of ancient Egyptian architecture. We're not just talking about stacking rocks here. The ingenuity of these builders makes modern architects look like kids with tinker toys. Let's start by unraveling the corbel vault, a technique that might sound like it belongs in a medieval castle, but was actually a cornerstone, pun intended, of Egyptian engineering. The corbel vault was the Egyptians' answer to the problem of building strong ceilings without the luxury of steel beams or reinforced concrete. Picture this: layers of stones piled ever so slightly inward until they met at the top, creating a kind of inverted V. It's a bit like playing an ancient game of Jenga, except instead of toppling over and losing, you end up with a sturdy roof. This technique was crucial in constructing tombs and temples, allowing for the creation of larger interior spaces without the fear of being squashed by a collapsing ceiling. But wait, it gets better. The Egyptians weren't just about brute force and clever stone stacking. They were the original stargazers, aligning their monuments with astronomical precision that would make NASA engineers nod in approval. Take the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example. This isn't just a giant triangle plopped in the desert. Its sides are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points of the compass, deviating by just a fraction of a degree. This precision wasn't accidental. It was a cosmic statement, a way of connecting the pharaoh's earthly reign with the divine order of the heavens. Now, before we go attributing this astronomical wizardry to little green men, let's set the record straight. The alien theory, while entertaining, is about as plausible as finding a Starbucks on Mars. The reality is far more impressive. The Egyptians used a simple yet effective tool called a gnomon, a vertical stick or stone, for measuring the sun's shadow and determining true north. It's a bit like ancient GPS, minus the annoying recalculating. Of course, when it comes to building such colossal structures, manpower was the name of the game. Forget the myth of legions of slaves toiling under the whip. While forced labor did play a role, particularly during the reigns of certain pharaohs, many of the workers were skilled laborers and farmers putting in their time during the Nile's annual flood. Picture an ancient employment agency. Wanted, pyramid builders, seasonal work, must enjoy heavy lifting and working outdoors. The sheer scale of this human endeavor is staggering. The Great Pyramid, for instance, required an estimated 3 million blocks, each weighing between 5 and 15 tons. To put that in perspective, that's like moving over 6 million SUVs. And they did it all with sledges, ramps, and a lot of elbow grease. Today's construction teams would probably faint if asked to pull off such a feat without cranes or bulldozers. Let's also talk about the blueprints of these ancient feats. You see, the Egyptians weren't just winging it. They had a pretty sophisticated grasp of geometry and architecture, as evidenced by the discovery of ancient papyrus scrolls. These documents laid out detailed plans, indicating that the Egyptians were methodical and precise in their approach. Think of it as the world's oldest architectural design software, but instead of CAD, they had papyrus and ink. The truth is, these ancient architects laid the groundwork, literally and figuratively, for modern engineering. The principles of load-bearing and structural efficiency they developed are still taught in engineering schools today. While they might not have had the fancy titles or degrees, the brains behind these pyramids and temples were nothing short of genius. So, next time someone suggests that aliens helped build the pyramids, remind them that the real extraterrestrial force here was the boundless human ingenuity and determination. The Egyptians didn't need help from otherworldly beings. They had their own brand of magic, knowledge, skill, and a bit of celestial alignment. As we continue our trek through the sands of history, let's remember that these monumental achievements are more than just relics of a bygone era. They're a testament to the power of human creativity and ambition, a reminder that when we set our sights on the stars, we might just end up building something that touches them. And while the pharaohs sought to immortalize themselves through these grand structures, it's the legacy of their builders, the untold stories of vision, labor, and innovation, that continues to captivate us thousands of years later. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the mysteries and marvels of ancient Egypt, where every stone tells a tale, and every tale offers a glimpse into the past that still resonates today. We're not done with the wonders of Egyptian architecture just yet, so hang tight as we uncover more secrets from the sands of time. As we continue our trek through the sands of history, let's consider how the legacy of ancient Egypt's architectural wonders continues to reverberate through the corridors of time, echoing as loudly today as they did thousands of years ago. These monumental marvels weren't just stone and sweat. They were the original influencers, casting their stony gaze across millennia and leaving an indelible mark on everything from modern architecture to pop culture. First, let's talk influence. The Egyptians didn't just build towering pyramids and sprawling temples. They built a blueprint for architectural awe that would inspire generations. Take the Washington Monument, for instance, standing proudly at 555 feet, which echoes the grandeur of Egyptian obelisks. Or the Louvre Pyramid in Paris, a cheeky nod to the triangles of Giza, blending ancient geometry with modern glass. Even our skyscrapers, with their steel and glass grandeur, borrow a page from the Egyptians' book, reaching for the skies in a bid to touch the divine, just like the pyramids once did. But it's not just the buildings that have stood the test of time. The allure of ancient Egypt is as persistent as the scent of strong coffee. Hollywood, for one, can't seem to get enough of it. From The Mummy to Indiana Jones, these films have spun tales of cursed tombs and hidden treasures, infusing the hard realities of Egyptian history with a dose of cinematic magic. Sure, these stories might stretch the truth more than a lycra bodysuit, but they tap into a universal fascination with the mysteries of the past. After all, who doesn't love a good yarn about buried secrets and ancient curses? And let's not forget the conspiracy theories. The pyramids have been credited with everything from being the handiwork of aliens to serving as celestial power plants. As outlandish as these ideas are, they speak to the enduring mystery and allure of these ancient wonders. People are drawn to the unknown like moths to a flame, and the pyramids, with their enigmatic aura, provide the perfect backdrop for flights of fancy. While the truth might be more grounded in human ingenuity than interstellar assistance, the myths add a layer of intrigue that keeps us coming back for more. Now, onto the gritty reality. As much as we love to romanticize the past, the truth is that building these colossal structures was no picnic. The grandeur of the pyramids and temples came at a cost. Human cost. The laborers who toiled to create these wonders were often subject to harsh conditions and back-breaking work. Yet, amid the dust and toil, there was also a sense of purpose and pride. For many, working on these monumental projects was a way to connect with the divine, a chance to be part of something greater than themselves. It's a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, the human spirit can find meaning and resilience. Economically, the construction of these architectural feats was a colossal undertaking. The resources required were staggering, drawing from the wealth of the Nile to fuel these grand projects. The temples and tombs were not just places of worship or burial. They were economic powerhouses, driving trade and labor. It's a testament to the organizational prowess of the Egyptians that they could marshal such resources, balancing the demands of the state with the needs of the people. Politically, these structures were as much about power as they were about piety. The pharaohs used them to cement their divine status, wielding the hammer of religion to forge a legacy that would endure long after their mortal remains had turned to dust. They were statements of dominance, etched in stone, proclaiming to all who gazed upon them that their builders were not just rulers, but gods in human form. So, what does this all mean for us today? The legacy of ancient Egypt is a complex tapestry, woven from threads of myth and reality. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a narrative shaped by human ambition, creativity, and folly. The grandeur of the pyramids and temples speaks to our innate desire to leave a mark, to build something that will outlast us. It's a universal quest for immortality, etched in stone and story. As we wrap up this journey through the architectural wonders of ancient Egypt, let's take a moment to appreciate the blend of romantic myths and gritty realities that continue to captivate us. These structures are more than just relics of a bygone era. They are a testament to the enduring power of human endeavor. They remind us that while the pharaohs may have sought to immortalize themselves in stone, it is the collective legacy of all who contributed to these wonders that truly endures. From the skilled artisans of Deir el-Medina to the visionary architects who aligned their structures with the stars, their stories live on, echoing through time, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. So, the next time you find yourself gazing at a skyscraper or watching a blockbuster film set in ancient Egypt, remember the foundations laid by those early builders. Their legacy is all around us, woven into the fabric of our culture, a reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's right there, in the shadows of the pyramids and the echoes of history, waiting to be discovered anew. And with that, we've reached the end of our journey through the architectural marvels of ancient Egypt. Keep those curiosity gears turning, because there's always more to uncover in the sands of time. Until next time, my fellow history buffs, keep digging for the truth. It's a treasure worth the hunt. In the sun-drenched lands of Aquitaine, where troubadours sang and wine flowed like gossip at a royal court, Eleanor was born into a world that was as opulent as it was complex. The year was 1122, and little did anyone suspect that this girl would grow up to be one of the most powerful and controversial figures of the Middle Ages. Eleanor's early life was a tapestry of wealth and cultural richness, sort of medieval Instagram feed of lavish feasts, glittering jewels, and courtly love poems that would make even the sappiest romantic swoon. Aquitaine wasn't your run-of-the-mill medieval backyard. It was a sprawling duchy, covering about a third of modern-day France, and it was richer than a chocolate cake at a royal banquet. The region was famed for its prosperity, a veritable cash cow for anyone fortunate enough to hold its reins. Eleanor's father, Duke William X, was such a man until his untimely death in 1137, when Eleanor was about 15. That's not exactly the age when most people are ready to manage a vast estate, but Eleanor wasn't most people. With her father gone, Eleanor became Duchess of Aquitaine, a title that came with more responsibility than a teenager at their first job interview. She was now one of the most eligible heiresses in Europe, and the suitors came knocking faster than you could say dowry. Enter Louis Roman VII of France, a king who, at the time, was more monk than monarch. Their marriage in 1137 was as political as a game of chess, with pieces moving to secure borders and balance power. This union wasn't about love. It was about strategy, like a medieval version of Survivor, with fewer immunity idols and more crown jewels. Eleanor and Louis's marriage was a curious affair. Louis might have been king, but Eleanor was no mere consort. She was intelligent, headstrong, and had a knack for political maneuvering that would make Machiavelli nod in approval. This was evident during the Second Crusade, which kicked off in 1147. Now, if you think road trips with family are tough, imagine a crusade, thousands of miles on horseback, through hostile territory, all while trying to keep the peace with a spouse who's more pious than practical. The Second Crusade was a disaster of epic proportions, with more blundering than a comedy of errors. Yet, it's during these turbulent times that Eleanor's legend began to take shape. There's a delightful, if somewhat dubious, tale that Eleanor and her ladies-in-waiting dressed as Amazon warriors during the Crusade, complete with armor and swords. It's the kind of story that makes for great dinner party anecdotes, but should probably be taken with a pinch of medieval salt. After all, chroniclers had a penchant for embellishment, and what better way to spice up a failed military campaign than with warrior queens? But let's not get too carried away by the romanticism. The reality of the crusade was grim. The European forces were unprepared, poorly led, and plagued by internal squabbles. Eleanor, however, demonstrated her political acumen by navigating these treacherous waters, even if it meant clashing with her husband. Her insistence on accompanying the crusade was more than just a desire for adventure. It was a statement of her status and influence. Eleanor's role in the crusade wasn't just about playing dress-up. She actively participated in strategic discussions, often advocating for courses of action that were, unsurprisingly, smarter than what the men had cooked up. This was a woman who understood the art of power, wielding her influence with a finesse that left many a baron and bishop flustered. The crusade did little to rekindle the royal marriage, which was about as warm as a medieval winter. Eleanor and Louis's union was strained, to say the least. Their personalities clashed like knights at a joust, with Eleanor's fiery independence at odds with Louis's devout rigidity. The couple's inability to produce a male heir, a medieval must-have, only added fuel to the fire. But Eleanor wasn't one to be sidelined by marital woes. She was already plotting her next move, a game of political chess that would see her cross paths with one of history's most formidable dynasties, the Plantagenets. As the crusade drew to an ignominious close, Eleanor returned to France, her marriage to Louis hanging by a thread thinner than a troubadour's looped string. The couple officially divorced in 1152, a move that shocked Europe, but seemed almost inevitable given their tumultuous relationship. Eleanor wasted no time in securing her future, swiftly marrying a man who would change the course of English history, Henry Plantagenet, the future Henry Roman II of England. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Eleanor's early years in Aquitaine, her strategic marriage to Louis Roman VII, and her bold participation in the Second Crusade set the stage for her future exploits. She was a woman ahead of her time, navigating a world dominated by men with a savvy that was as rare as it was remarkable. Her story is one of power, politics, and a touch of medieval theatre, with a legacy that continues to captivate and confound. As we delve deeper into her life, we'll see that Eleanor of Aquitaine was more than just a queen. She was a force of nature, a woman whose influence would echo through the corridors of history long after the troubadours had sung their last song. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life was a tapestry of political intrigue, coloured by her tumultuous relationship with Louis Roman VII, the King of France. Their union, more contractual than conjugal, was a strategic power play that brought together the immense wealth of Aquitaine and the regal authority of the French crown. But let's not kid ourselves. This was no fairy tale romance. Their marriage was less about moonlit strolls and more about maneuvering through the labyrinth of medieval geopolitics, with each step fraught with tension and mutual misunderstanding. Eleanor and Louis were as mismatched as a pair of socks from a discount bin. Louis, a pious man who probably thought that the height of excitement was a particularly rousing hymn, was as rigid as a cathedral spire. Eleanor, on the other hand, was a force of nature, intelligent, ambitious, and unafraid to voice her opinions in a world where women were often expected to be seen and not heard. Theirs was a marriage that simmered with discord, exacerbated by the lack of a male heir, a situation that would have made any medieval marriage counselor throw up their hands in despair. By 1152, the marriage was as threadbare as a troubadour's old cloak, and the couple decided to call it quits. The annulment was granted on the grounds of consanguinity, a fancy medieval term for we're actually fourth cousins, which, let's face it, was more of a convenient excuse than a genuine revelation. The divorce was a scandalous affair, sending shockwaves through the courts of Europe. But for Eleanor, it was a liberation, a chance to reclaim her life and political agency. Now, let's talk money and land, because, in the Middle Ages, these were the real power players. The annulment had enormous economic implications. Aquitaine, which had been under the control of the French crown during Eleanor's marriage to Louis, reverted to her possession. This wasn't just any piece of land. It was a region that accounted for a significant chunk of France's wealth, with its vineyards, trade routes, and bustling towns. The return of Aquitaine effectively weakened the French monarchy's grip on its territories, a blow that Louis would feel for years. Eleanor, ever the strategist, was not about to let the ink dry on her annulment papers before making her next move. Enter Henry Plantagenet, the future Henry Roman II of England. Henry was everything Louis wasn't: dynamic, ambitious, and at the ripe old age of 19, already a seasoned political player. Within weeks of her divorce, Eleanor and Henry were married, a union that was as much about political calculus as it was about chemistry. This marriage set the stage for a new power dynamic in Europe. Now, you might think that Eleanor, having jumped from one royal marriage to another, would have settled into a life of domestic bliss. But Eleanor wasn't one to play the part of the demure wife. Her marriage to Henry was a partnership of titans, and their combined territories created an Angevin empire that spanned from the Scottish borders to the Pyrenees. This was a medieval power couple that ruled over more land than the French king himself, which must have felt like a particularly sharp thorn in Louis's side. Yet the union of Eleanor and Henry was far from harmonious. Their relationship was fiery, passionate, and often contentious. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a rock band with too many lead singers. Eleanor was fiercely independent and had little patience for Henry's autocratic tendencies. Their arguments were legendary, filled with enough drama and verbal sparring to make modern political debates look like a friendly game of chess. Despite their disagreements, Eleanor and Henry were a formidable team, both politically savvy and unafraid to wield their considerable power. Eleanor was not content to be a silent partner. She played an active role in the governance of their vast territories, managing affairs in Aquitaine with more skill than many of her male counterparts. This wasn't just a queen sitting prettily on a throne. This was a woman who understood the intricacies of feudal politics, and she played the game with the tenacity of a seasoned general. However, Eleanor's assertiveness was a double-edged sword. Her refusal to be sidelined often led to clashes with Henry, who was used to being the undisputed ruler of his domain. Their relationship was a constant push and pull, with each trying to assert their will over the other. It was a partnership that was as volatile as it was vibrant, with both parties locked in a dance of power that would continue to shape the course of European history. As we delve further into Eleanor's life, it becomes clear that she was not merely a queen consort, but a political force in her own right. Her marriage to Henry Roman II was a pivotal chapter in her story, one that set the stage for future conflicts and alliances that would ripple through the centuries. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a queen who defied convention, a woman who wielded power with a deftness that was as extraordinary then as it is inspiring now. Her legacy is a testament to her indomitable spirit, a reminder that even in a world dominated by men, a determined woman could carve out her own destiny. But don't think for a second that Eleanor's story ends here. There are more twists, turns, and power plays ahead, and they promise to be just as riveting as what's come before. So, Eleanor of Aquitaine was not just any queen. She was a medieval powerhouse who could negotiate a treaty as smoothly as she could host a banquet. Her marriage to Henry Roman II of England ushered in a period of intense political activity, where she wielded her influence like a maestro, conducting a symphony of power. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't some idyllic royal romance. It was more like a medieval season of Game of Thrones, complete with alliances, betrayals, and enough drama to make a soap opera look like a Sunday picnic. Eleanor's lands were a crucial part of this power play. Aquitaine was not just any duchy. It was a veritable gold mine, contributing significantly to the wealth and military strength of the Angevin Empire. Imagine controlling a region that covered about a third of modern-day France and trying to keep it in check while your husband's off fighting battles and your sons are plodding like it's a medieval version of Succession. Eleanor's role as Queen of England was not just ceremonial. She was actively involved in managing these vast territories. Now, if you think juggling a career and family today is tough, try managing an empire with rebellious teenage sons who have a penchant for uprising. Enter the Great Revolt of 1173-1174, a family feud that would rival any reality TV showdown. Eleanor's sons, Henry the young king, Richard, yes, the Lionheart, and Geoffrey, decided to challenge their father's authority in what can only be described as the medieval equivalent of a family boardroom battle gone awry. Their motivations were a cocktail of ambition, rivalry, and youthful defiance, with Eleanor reportedly egging them on like a stage mom with a vendetta. Eleanor's involvement in the revolt was no small thing. She was a mastermind, coordinating efforts from her territories in Aquitaine and using her considerable political acumen to rally support. But this was no teenage rebellion. The stakes were life and death, with the future of an empire hanging in the balance. Henry Roman II, no stranger to political intrigue himself, responded with the kind of decisiveness that would make any modern CEO proud. He quashed the rebellion with a combination of military might and strategic alliances, proving that, despite their familial ties, he was not above putting his sons in their place. The fallout was as messy as a medieval banquet after too much wine. For Eleanor, it meant imprisonment. Henry, perhaps feeling the sting of betrayal more keenly than any battlefield wound, had her locked up in 1173. And we're not talking about a cushy house arrest with Netflix and chill. Nope, this was the real deal. House arrest in royal castles, where she was kept under strict surveillance. Her imprisonment lasted a staggering 16 years, proving that in medieval politics, family ties were as brittle as the crust on a day-old baguette. Now, let's pause and consider the irony. Here was Eleanor, a woman who had navigated the treacherous waters of European politics with the grace of a seasoned diplomat, now reduced to the status of a prisoner due to the machinations of her own family. It's a testament to the brutal realities of medieval power dynamics, where loyalty was often a luxury and betrayal a common currency. But Eleanor was nothing if not resilient. Her imprisonment, while undoubtedly harsh, did not break her spirit. She remained a formidable figure, her influence felt even from behind the castle walls. And when Henry finally released her in 1189, following his death, Eleanor emerged not as a defeated prisoner, but as a queen ready to reclaim her place in the political arena. She took up the regency for her son, Richard the Lionheart, proving that even in her twilight years, she was a force to be reckoned with. Eleanor's story during this period is one of resilience and political savvy, a narrative that challenges the romanticized view of queens as mere consorts. She was a queen who understood the intricacies of power, a woman who played the game with a cunning that would leave even the most seasoned politicians in awe. Her legacy during her imprisonment is a stark reminder that in the medieval world, power was both a privilege and a peril, a dance that required equal measures of grace and grit. As we continue our journey through Eleanor's life, it's clear that her story is far from over. This chapter may have seen her behind bars, but her influence and legacy will continue to shape the course of history long after the chains had been removed. Eleanor of Aquitaine was more than just a queen. She was a political juggernaut, a woman of unparalleled strength and determination whose life remains a source of inspiration and intrigue. The tale of Eleanor is a tapestry rich in color and complexity, with each thread weaving a story of ambition, power, and resilience that continues to captivate us centuries later. With Henry Roman II's death in 1189, Eleanor's imprisonment came to a rather dramatic close, like the grand opening of a medieval stage play where the protagonist bursts onto the scene, ready to reclaim the spotlight. And reclaim it she did, stepping into the role of regent for her son, Richard the Lionheart. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a royal family reunion with scones and forgiveness, think again. Eleanor had no time for sentimentality. She was too busy maneuvering through the labyrinth of politics that would make even the most seasoned diplomat break a sweat. Richard, the golden boy of medieval chivalry, was off on a crusade faster than you could say, Holy Land. Leaving behind the ever-capable Eleanor to keep the kingdom from spiraling into chaos was like handing the car keys to a Formula One driver. Her regency was a masterclass in diplomacy and governance. She was more than just a placeholder. She was the linchpin holding together a kingdom that was as stable as a Jenga tower in a windstorm. Now, let's debunk a bit of the romance surrounding Richard the Lionheart. While his name conjures images of a gallant knight, let's not forget his absence from England was almost as legendary as his battlefield exploits. The man spent a grand total of 6 months in England during his decade-long reign. Yes, you heard that right, 6 months. So, while Richard was out crusading, Eleanor was the one ensuring that the realm didn't crumble like a poorly baked pie crust. Her political acumen was put to the ultimate test when Richard, in a turn of events that would make any mother sigh in exasperation, was captured on his way home from the crusade in 1192. This wasn't just a minor setback. It was a full-blown international incident. The ransom demanded for his release was a staggering 150,000 marks. To give you a sense of scale, that was about 3 times the annual income of the English crown. It was like being asked to pay today's national debt with a personal check. Eleanor, undeterred, tackled the challenge with the tenacity of a chess grandmaster facing checkmate. She orchestrated a campaign to raise the ransom, a feat that required not just financial wizardry, but also a hefty dose of charm and persuasion. She leveraged everything from the royal treasury to church contributions, and even organized a tax known as the Saladin Tithe, a sort of medieval GoFundMe campaign, but with fewer cat videos and more ecclesiastical endorsements. The romanticized view of Richard as the ultimate knight in shining armor conveniently glosses over the fact that his capture and subsequent ransom nearly bankrupted the kingdom. It's a narrative straight of a medieval adventure tale, complete with a daring rescue led by a formidable queen. But behind the chivalric veneer, the reality was a financial quagmire that Eleanor navigated with deft precision. Her ability to negotiate and rally support was nothing short of legendary, proving once more that she was the true power behind the throne, even if that throne was temporarily vacant. Throughout all this, Eleanor wasn't just managing finances. She was also maintaining the delicate balance of power across Europe. Her diplomatic ventures were as intricate as a lace doily, weaving together alliances and treaties that kept both enemies and allies on their toes. Her correspondence was legendary, with letters flying faster than a carrier pigeon on caffeine. She brokered peace, quelled rebellions, and ensured that the political landscape remained as stable as possible given the circumstances. Eleanor's regency was a testament to her unparalleled political acumen, a period where her influence was both profound and pragmatic. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the beating heart of the Angevin Empire, a woman who wielded power with a finesse that left even her most ardent critics in awe. Her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval politics was as much about her intelligence as it was about her indomitable will. Yet, despite her successes, the myth of Richard's chivalry often overshadows Eleanor's contributions. The image of the lion-hearted king gallivanting about in the name of Christendom is a romanticized tale that conveniently ignores the gritty reality of Eleanor's behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Richard was indeed a formidable warrior, but it was Eleanor who ensured that the kingdom he left behind was still intact upon his return. As we examine Eleanor's life and legacy, it becomes clear that her story is one of resilience, strategy, and unyielding strength. Her role as regent was not just a footnote in Richard's narrative, but a chapter in its own right, one that showcases her ability to wield power with a deftness that was as rare as it was remarkable. The ransom episode, while often romanticized, serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of medieval rule, where the lines between legend and reality were as blurred as an out-of-focus tapestry. Eleanor's life was a series of challenges that she met with an unwavering resolve, her story a testament to her enduring legacy as one of history's most formidable queens. Her influence was felt long after the ransom was paid, her legacy a tapestry woven with threads of power, politics, and perseverance. So, while Richard may have been the Lionheart, it was Eleanor who proved time and again that the true heart of a kingdom lies in the hands of its most capable ruler. As we journey further into her life, we'll discover that Eleanor's story has more layers to unravel, each revealing new facets of her remarkable legacy. And so, as we unspool the final years of Eleanor of Aquitaine's storied life, let's not forget that this indomitable queen was about as close to a medieval superhero as you could get. With Richard safely back in the saddle and the kingdom yet again stable-ish, Eleanor's job was far from over. Remember, this was a woman who didn't just dabble in power. She practically invented the playbook for ruling in a man's world. The year was 1199, and Richard the Lionheart made the rather unexpected career move of dying from an infected arrow wound. Enter John, Eleanor's youngest, who sat next in line for the throne. Now, if you know anything about King John, it's that his reign was less like a fairy tale and more like a cautionary tale. But before we dive into his less-than-stellar legacy, let's focus on Eleanor's role in getting him there. With Richard's untimely demise, Eleanor had to play a high-stakes game to secure John's succession. She was in her late 70s by now, an age when most medieval folks were more concerned with preparing their souls for the afterlife than with political machinations. But Eleanor was no ordinary medieval dame. She rallied support for John, leveraging her extensive network of alliances like a political puppet master. Her influence was a tapestry woven over decades, each thread a connection she'd meticulously crafted. Eleanor's strategy was clear. Make sure John, not her grandson Arthur of Brittany, ascended the English throne. This wasn't just about familial loyalty. It was about ensuring stability in a kingdom that was as prone to infighting as a pack of hungry wolves. Arthur had his supporters, particularly in France, and Eleanor knew that his claim, if successful, could fracture the empire she and Henry had built. So, she did what any seasoned politician would do. She got to work. In 1200, Eleanor journeyed to Castile to arrange the marriage of her granddaughter Blanche to the French king's son, Louis Roman VIII, an alliance that would prove crucial in neutralizing French support for Arthur. Picture this, an octogenarian crossing the Pyrenees, negotiating marriages like a seasoned diplomat, while most people her age were busy worrying about the medieval equivalent of where to find their next soft chair. Her efforts ensured that John's claim was secure, and by 1202, Arthur was captured and subsequently disappeared under mysterious circumstances, an event shrouded in so much intrigue that it would make a mystery novelist drool. John's reign, however, was a different kettle of fish. If Eleanor was the consummate chess master, John was the hapless player who accidentally knocked over the board. His rule was marked by a series of blunders that culminated in signing the Magna Carta in 1215, a document born out of the baron's frustration with his mismanagement. If nothing else, John inadvertently laid the groundwork for modern constitutional governance, proving that even the worst rulers can have a silver lining, though probably not the kind Eleanor would have preferred. Now, as we reflect on Eleanor's legacy, let's tackle the myths head-on. The romanticized image of Eleanor as a damsel in distress or a mere pawn in the political games of kings is as misleading as a medieval map claiming dragons lurk at the edge of the world. Sure, tales of her beauty and charisma litter the chronicles, but they overshadow her real achievements, her intellect, her political savvy, and her sheer determination to navigate a patriarchal society that was about as welcoming as a snake pit. Eleanor's influence extended far beyond the borders of her own time. She was a patron of the arts, a supporter of the troubadours who sang the chivalric romances that would inspire generations. Her courts in Poitiers and Aquitaine became centers of culture and learning, and she herself was a living testament to the power of education and intellect. She was a queen who understood that while swords and crowns might win battles, it was ideas that ultimately shaped the world. Her legacy is a tapestry of contradictions, a woman both revered and reviled, both a product of her time and a force that transcended it. Eleanor's life was a masterclass in the art of survival, a case study in wielding influence in a world where women were often relegated to the sidelines. Her story is a reminder that history is as much about the people who shape it as it is about the events that unfold. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life was not just a footnote in the annals of history. It was a saga of resilience and relevance, a narrative that challenges us to look beyond the myths and see the woman who, against all odds, carved out her own destiny. Her impact on European politics and culture was profound, legacy that echoes through the ages with a resonance that is as powerful today as it was in her own time. So, as we bid adieu to Eleanor and her remarkable story, let's carry forward the lessons of her life. She was a woman who defied the conventions of her era, a queen whose influence was as indelible as it was inspiring. Eleanor may have walked the earth centuries ago, but her legacy continues to remind us that the true measure of power is not just in the crowns we wear, but in the courage to wield it wisely.